Chapter 2055. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed her waist and kissed her. Feng Qianxie felt that he had suddenly become very strange. He really liked the feeling of kissing her, and the moment he touched her pink lips, his heart began to wildly beat. He wanted to kiss her whenever he looked at her and was constantly suppressing his emotions. But when she took the initiative, he could not hold back at all. This kiss was gentle, lingering, and scorching. He was very clear that the person in front of him would be the only love of his life, and no one could change that. In the bustling Chang and city, everything was the same as before. This was the first time Luo Qingshun had seen Chang, and after coming to this world. It was the same as the original owner's memories, and it was very lively. Feng Qianxie's carriage went through a small path and arrived at the Eastern Palace. The Eastern Palace was not inside the Imperial Palace, but in another palace not far from the Imperial Palace. "Greetings to your Highness, the Crown Prince." As soon as they came in, an orderly voice rang out. He gave a soft unsound and then said to the housekeeper, "Bring this girl to the Linhua Hall. Take a trip out of the palace and buy all the clothes in the embroidery workshop." "Yes." The housekeeper looked at Luo Qingshun and respectfully nodded. "Choose 4 clever servants to take care of this young lady while she washes up. Have the kitchen prepare a banquet and bring it directly to the Linhua Hall." "Yes." Feng Qianxie explained everything in detail, making everyone in the Eastern Palace look at Luo Qingshun. Although this girl was wearing men's clothes and did not wear any makeup, it could not hide her beauty that could cause the downfall of a country. Every movement she made had a special aura. As soon as his voice fell, he turned to look at Luo Qingshun and said, "I want to take a trip into the palace. Although I did my best to keep it a secret at the Snow Peak Mountain, Royal Father should know. Since Ninth Brother has the ability to assassinate me, you should bear the consequences." I'll wait for you here." Luo Qingshun gave a soft laugh and said, "Come back early. I just saw that Chang and street was filled with lanterns. Today seems to be the Mid-Autumn Festival." "Okay." He dragged out the word and gently patted her head. "Eat well and don't make me think about you, even though I'll definitely miss you." Hearing Feng Qianxie's words, she felt her face turn red again. She lowered her head in embarrassment and touched her ear. The surrounding servants all had shocked expressions on their faces, but the surrounding guards all had indifferent expressions on their faces. These days, listening to Feng Qianxie's gentle and doting voice, they were probably already used to it. In fact, their master wasn't a block of ice. It was just that he hadn't met anyone who could make him smile all these years. Now that they had met, he was no longer the cold and aloof crown prince. After taking a bath, the 4 maidservants each held a row of clothes and stood outside the curtain, looking at her with smiles on their faces. "Miss, these are the ready-made clothes that we brought from Splendid Embroidery Workshop today. Miss, you can choose one to wear. His Highness the Crown Prince has already gone to the clothing workshop in the palace to order brocade from the palace. It will be delivered in a few days." Luo Qingshun looked at the multicolored silk and satin in their hands and finally chose a moon-white dress. The original owner loved dark-colored clothes when she was alive. She always felt that Rongmu Ling could see her like this. At least if he saw her, she would be satisfied. She didn't know that if a person didn't have you in their heart, then they wouldn't have you in their eyes. When she appeared in Feng Qianxie's life, she was so down and out, but now she was a treasure in his hands. Chapter 2056. Luo Qingshun let go of the original owner's hair and sat in front of the bronze mirror with the hazy hibiscus hairstyle that young girls loved. She only had light makeup on, and it was not like the original owner's heavy makeup. However, it wasn't as disheveled as she was later on. Perhaps this was the effect of her light makeup. "Miss is truly beautiful. This servant has never seen such a beautiful girl in my life." That's right. Our crown prince has good eyes. Either he doesn't find a girl as a companion, or he finds a beauty that can topple cities. The maidservants praised her one after another. Although it was mostly flattery, she sounded very happy. In the evening, Feng Qianxie returned as promised. The trace of worry on her face had disappeared. It seemed like the matter of the Qing Sun Temple assassination had already been taken care of. Just as he came in, he saw Luo Qingshun standing in the back garden, looking at the peach blossoms in a daze. Although her face was faint, it still made him lose his mind. He saw that she was wearing a moon-white robe with lotus root silk satin and a pair of cloud-embroidered shoes on her feet. Her long hair had a peach blossom hairpin in it, and at her waist was the acacia bell that he had given her. The night wind blew, and the acacia bell at her waist jingled, creating a clear and pleasant sound. Luo Qingshun felt that someone was looking at her. The moment she turned around, she met his deep as ink eyes. "I'm back." His lips curled into a smile as he slowly walked in her direction. He gently picked up the peach blossom petals on her head and asked, "Why are you looking at these flowers so infatuated?" "I'll tell you a story." Luo Qingshun looked up, and a trace of sadness flashed in her eyes. That sadness did not come from her, but rather from the original owner. At this moment, she was standing in the back garden of the Eastern Palace. When she closed her eyes, she could still see the original owner's 3 years in the Rome Manor. Every scene, every blade of grass, every tree, they were all clear. Actually, it was not that she wanted to think about it, but the original owner's obsession was too deep. She could more or less understand her obsession. 3 years, 1,095 days and nights. It was not easy for her to endure it alone. But Rong Muling had never seen her forbearance, her loneliness, or even the slightest bit of goodness in her. "Looking at your expression, I can roughly guess that this should be a tragic story." Feng Qinshe rubbed her head and said, "There's no rush. I came back especially to have dinner with you. You can take your time to tell me." The Crown Prince's Eastern Palace was a place of honor, so the dinner was naturally sumptuous. As she ate the fish and meat, she told the story of the garden full of pear blossoms in a relaxed tone. Feng Qinshe listened carefully, and his deep eyes flickered. He narrowed his eyes and asked her, "Are you jealous?" Luo Qingshun thought for a moment and stuffed the osmanthus cake in her mouth. She looked at him and said, "I envy you." With this answer, she spoke the thoughts of the original owner. Those were the deepest obsessions hidden in the depths of her heart. Back then, she had really wanted to see a garden full of peach blossoms. But she knew that for this kind of scene to appear in her dreams, it was a kind of luxury. "Fool." He gave a soft laugh, and a faint gentleness appeared in his eyes as he said, "It's just a story. There's no need to be so sad." "I'm not sad. How can you see that I'm sad?" Luo Qingshun shook her head and said, "I just feel that it's not worth it for that girl." Chapter 2057. After dinner, Feng Qinshe washed up and changed into another set of ivory white robes. A white jade pendant hung from his waist. When he waved his fan, he looked like an elegant young scholar and not the high and mighty crown prince. "Our family's crown prince really is good-looking." Luo Qingshun gave a soft laugh. The corners of her lips slightly rose, revealing a sweet smile. "Bringing you to see the lanterns really makes your mouth sweet." He gave a soft laugh and held her hand as he said, "I still remember you saying that I was the best looking before." "What?" She did not remember all the nice things she said, but she remembered everything related to Rong Muling so clearly. "Aya." She pursed her lips and said with a soft laugh, "I was still young and didn't know anything back then. I also didn't like myself at that time. Not only was I childish, my eyes were also bad." Feng Qinshe heard Luo Qingshun's forced explanation and helplessly shook his head with a smile. "The crown prince seems to be very dissatisfied with me." Luo Qingshun gave a slight nod and pretended to look at him with a proud expression. I don't dare." His gaze was gentle. When he walked out of the crown prince's Eastern Palace, he softly muttered, "Whatever you want, you will have it." He did not know when it started, but the thing she liked had become the center of his life and the goal he constantly worked towards. She wanted to see the lanterns. Even if his father asked him to stay for dinner, he still wanted to come back. Perhaps it could not be said that he missed her that much after not seeing her for a few hours, but his heart had always been concerned. The streets were long and the lanterns were messy. Looking back at the lanterns, today was probably the most lively day in Chang and city outside of New Year's. On the streets, almost everyone was holding a lantern. By the river, there were lotus lanterns floating in the air. In the sky, there were sky lanterns one after another. Let's also go right about sky lanterns. Luo Qingshun pulled his hand through the large streets and small alleys, walking to the side of a vendor selling sky lanterns. Feng Qianche lowered his head and gave a soft laugh. The feeling of being led around by her made his heart feel especially warm. It turned out that the feeling of having someone by your side was this good. Grand Prince, pay up. Luo Qingshun chuckled and picked up the brush on the table. She looked at him and said, "Let's each write on one side. We can't peek when we write." "All right," Feng Qianche softly responded. She thought for a long time and did not put her pen to paper. As for Luo Qingshun, she had already filled her side of the sky lantern. "You took so long to write a wish." Luo Qingshun tilted her head and looked at him. "Could it be that all your wishes have come true?" He turned the end of the brush and gently knocked on her head. "You're not allowed to peek. Flowers bloom in my dream, waiting for you to come, holding your hand, staying with you." This was the last line of words that Feng Qianche wrote on the Kongming lantern. Luo Qingshun stole a glance, and a smile that was hard to hide rose from the corner of her mouth. It was probably because of this sentence that she chose the completely unbelievable option when she made a choice later on. The Kongming lantern rose slowly. Feng Qianche narrowed his eyes and saw her words clearly. She was confident and cute, but there was also a hint of arrogance in her words. "You will never meet a second Luo Qingshun in your life. Please treat her well." When they saw each other's words, they looked at each other and smiled. She was against the light, and her white cheeks had a faint blush as she looked at him with a sweet smile. And this scene was coincidentally seen by Rong Mu Ling, who was drinking wine not far away. Chapter 2058. Qingshun. His lips were thin as he muttered her name, his eyes filled with disbelief. No, impossible. The Luo family was still searching for her around the lake. If she was still alive, how could she not return home? Rong Mu Ling rubbed his eyes. The young girl wearing a moon-white dress had her back to him. In front of her stood a very familiar face, but due to his hangover, he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. She was wearing a white robe and had a graceful bearing. She had a faint smile on her face and was as graceful as a startled swan. Why was it that when he saw this scene, his heart suddenly jerked and he felt like he couldn't breathe? Everything around him was a blur, and the only thing that was clear was the woman in the white robe. No, it definitely wasn't her. His heart kept denying this answer, and a terrifying thought even appeared in his mind. Perhaps she really was dead, and he only felt guilt towards her, but he wouldn't feel this kind of suffocating feeling. Rong Mu Ling took a deep breath and quickly passed through the crowd while muttering to himself. She never liked the color white, and she wouldn't come out for some lantern festival. She doesn't know how to be Lan Lingqian. She would never act coquettishly and wouldn't stick to him and have him bring her to the lantern festival. Actually, Rong Mu Ling's thoughts were not wrong. The previous host had joined the Rong family for 3 years and almost never left the house. There were even some people who didn't know what the Rong family's first wife looked like. For them, their impression of Lan Lingqian was deeper, because every time the court hosted a banquet or a banquet in the palace, he would bring Lan Lingqian with him. Whether it was his friends or relatives, everyone seemed to have forgotten about the Rong family's first wife. In Rong Mu Ling's eyes, he only had one wife, and that was Lan Lingqian. In the crowd, he desperately ran in the direction of his memories, but when he arrived in front of the lantern stall, it was another unfamiliar face. "Qingshun," he gasped and grabbed the white-robed girl's wrist. But when he turned around, it was not the person he had seen before. "Who are you? Crazy. Don't touch my wife. You reek of alcohol. Wife, let's go." They seemed to be an ordinary couple. Could it be that he was mistaken? Perhaps he was mistaken. They had been married for 3 years, but he had never seen her smile like that before. It was so pure and carefree. "Boss, did a woman in white come here to buy a lantern just now?" She's about this tall, and there's also a handsome man standing beside her. The owner glanced at him and sized him up before saying, "Drunkard, go away, go away. Don't interfere with my business." Rong Mu Ling only needed a glance to see that the boss was thinking for a moment. He took out a bag of silver and said, "I'll buy all of your Kongming lanterns. Answer my question." He narrowed his eyes, and looked at the peddler with an aura that ordinary people did not have. The boss weighed the purse in his hand, and his expression changed instantly. Master. So was this Master. This little one really had eyes, but did not recognize MT Tai. Just now, there was a heaven-shaking couple that came to buy Kongming lanterns. After they bought them, they went towards the riverbank. Thank you. Rong Mu Ling responded and quickly ran towards the riverbank. Along the way, his heart was almost in his throat. A heaven-shaking appearance. Could it really be Luo Qingshun? Chapter 2059. It was probably because of the Mid-Autumn Festival that there were many more people releasing river lanterns than sky lanterns. Luo Qingshun held candied hawthorn in her left hand and cotton candy in her right hand. Her mouth did not stop moving the entire way. It was probably because she had been starving for the past 2 days, causing her to feel hungry even after eating a lot for dinner. Feng Qianshe followed behind her, creating a safe zone around her. As long as a man deliberately wanted to pass by her, he would immediately turn around with a single look. He did not know where his deterrence came from. Perhaps it was the Crown Prince's innate ability. In short, as long as he glared at someone, not a single person dared to approach them, until he saw Rong Mu Ling's figure. They were on the stone bridge, and he was on the opposite side of the river where the lanterns were. There was a bit of panic in his eyes, as if he was looking for something, constantly pacing back and forth. Feng Qianshe narrowed his eyes, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Qing Qing. He softly called out to Luo Qingshun. Then he raised his right hand and grabbed her delicate wrist, bringing her into his embrace. His left hand touched her face, turning her back to the opposite side of the river. In the next second, he unhesitatingly kissed her deeply on the lips on this stone bridge filled with people coming and going. The sweetness of hawthorn mixed with cotton candy mixed in her mouth. Luo Qingshun's brain almost completely stopped working at this moment. She did not even respond, allowing Feng Qianshe to kiss her as she tossed and turned. Oh. After a round of jeering and booing, there was an instant of warm palms. While Feng Qianshe kissed her, he did not forget to slightly open his eyes and look in the opposite direction of the river. That man wearing a black robe seemed to be looking in his direction. His brows furrowed for a long time before he slowly relaxed and left in the other direction. At this moment, Rong Mu Ling already had an answer in his heart. That person could not be Luo Qingshun. Even if he felt that it was her for a moment when he saw the man and woman on the stone bridge kiss each other to death, he was certain that it was not her. In his eyes, Luo Qingshun would never do such a thing. She was the daughter of a noble family, and in the 3 years that she had been married to him, she had been virtuous and conservative. It was impossible for her to kiss a man in front of everyone. Moreover, he clearly knew in his heart she loved him. However, her love had always been coldly blocked outside the door by him. Until Lan Lingqian's miscarriage, he personally shattered her love and all her dreams. In the end, he had let her down. On this mid-autumn night, a bright moon hung in the sky. To Rong Mu Ling, this was a sleepless night. She was drowning in her drunkenness as she recalled the scene when they first met. It seemed to be autumn, and the ground was covered with yellow flowers and maple leaves. Her gaze fell only on the peach blossom tree. The moment she raised her eyes were incomparably clear. But at that time, Luo Qingshun was just a pretty girl to him. He already had Lan Lingqian in his heart, but there was no room for anyone else. But his arrogance still existed. At that time, the sons of the other 2 ministers waved their swords in front of her to show off. The proud him landed on the ground with Qing Gong and pulled out the sword at his waist, performing another set of drunken mortal dust. The peach blossom tree gently shook, and several peach blossom petals flew in the air with his sword. Chapter 2060. At the same time, on the stone bridge, Feng Qianshe saw that Rong Mu Ling, who was on the other side of the river, had already walked far away. Finally, he gave Luo Qingshun a deep kiss before gently letting her go. After a few seconds, her originally snow-white cheeks instantly turned red, and she angrily looked at him. "What are you doing?" Heavens! In front of everyone, surrounded by bright lanterns, he still recklessly kissed her on the stone bridge. This This plane was too open. Host, a modern person, actually said that an ancient person was open. Io, you scared me to death. I thought my mission was complete. The time is not right. Not right, your sister. It's already like this, and it's still not right. Also, this treasure is not a modern person. This treasure is a space-time person. Or you can call me a space-time person, because I want to tell the whole world that you belong to me. Feng Qianxie alone. His expression was very serious, and his gaze was very focused. There seemed to be a kind of possessive light in his eyes, layer upon layer. It made people unable to see clearly. Why do I feel like you've met a love rival? Luo Qingshun looked at his somewhat jealous expression and felt that it was strange. After all, there were no other men by her side. As for her identity, Feng Qianxie should not know. However, she had to find a time to properly tell him the whole story. Perhaps. Feng Qianxie hooked his lips into a smile and looked at her with a doting gaze. In the past, the teacher told me that once one falls into the river of love, one will become jealous. I should be at this stage right now. Luo Qingshun thought in her heart. You should be at the stage of flirting and whispering sweet nothings. When they returned to the Eastern Palace, it was already very late. Feng Qianxie did not immediately return to the Linhua Hall, but headed to the prison in the Eastern Palace. Luo Qingshun suddenly remembered that Dong Liang was still locked inside. She did not know what kind of punishment that delicate youth would receive. Death, perhaps it was impossible to escape. However, whether it was a pleasant or painful death depended on Feng Qianxie's thoughts. Moreover, assassinating the crown prince was a crime punishable by 9 familial exterminations. Luo Qingshun, who was sitting in the Linhua Hall, originally planned to wait for Feng Qianxie to return. Little did she know that she would fall asleep while waiting. After all, it had been a long time since she had a good night's sleep. The next morning, when she woke up, she found that she had moved from the soft couch in the hall to the large bed in the inner hall. However, there was no sign of Feng Qianxie beside her. Hearing the sound of her waking up, the 4 quick-witted maidservants came in one after another with towels, wash basins, clothes, and other things to wash up and wear. Miss, breakfast is ready for you. One of the maidservants obediently smiled and said, The crown prince told this servant to wait for Miss to wake up and tell Miss that he won't be eating with you today, but Miss must eat breakfast. Luo Qingshun slightly knit her brows when she heard this. This sentence could be expressed clearly with just a few words, but after adding some honorifics and muttering to himself, it became a little awkward. Especially this servant girl. This servant girl is really too troublesome. What is your name? Luo Qingshun waved her hand and took the towel to wash her face. Put down your things and go about your business. Chapter 2061. When Luo Qingshun heard Hong Er's words, she was a little frightened. So Feng Qianxie was such a violent person. Why did she not feel it? Other than the initial coldness, what she felt the most was his gentleness and pampering. Your family's crown prince is so violent. Little did she know that Luo Qingshun's conclusion would cause the 4 servant girls' faces to turn white, and they all knelt down. They said in unison, Miss, please spare us. This servant spoke wrongly, and this servant deserves to die. Cuckoo. Luo Qingshun was stunned for a moment before clearing her throat and saying, Is your family's crown prince usually very fierce? The 4 of them heard this and looked at each other in dismay. Then Har slowly said, replying to Miss, It is not the crown prince who is fierce, but rather the housekeeper pursues rules and restrictions. You can all rise. Luo Qingshun shrugged and said with a faint smile, Your housekeeper's words are not wrong. In the palace, trouble comes from a mouth. Speak less and do more, and you will not make a mistake. Yes, miss. That's right. What did your family's crown prince do in the morning? Luo Qingshun asked while putting on her clothes. Replying to Miss, tomorrow is the crown prince's birthday. In the past, the crown prince's birthday was always organized by the empress in the palace. Honger obediently replied. Although all the civil and military officials are gathered, the crown prince has never appeared. What? Luo Qingshun was stunned for a moment before saying, Tomorrow is his birthday? Feng Qianxie had never mentioned this to her. If Hong did not mention it, wouldn't she not even know his birthday? That's right, but your family's crown prince is very arrogant, not appearing at all. Luo Qingqian's brows slightly trembled as she said, "Then why is he busy with his birthday this year?" In truth, she could understand why Feng Qianxie was not willing to celebrate his birthday. After all, his mother, Ling Long, had left the world after accompanying him for a year. For him, this kind of birthday would only increase his sorrow. Perhaps, but it was nothing. His Highness the Crown Prince said that this year's birthday banquet will be held in the Eastern Palace. And I understand. After breakfast, Luo Qingqian found an excuse to leave through the back door of the Eastern Palace. Actually, she knew that Feng Qianxie's personal bodyguard had been following her the entire time, and her every move had been under his eyes. But it didn't matter. She just wanted to buy him a birthday present. After all, it didn't seem right to celebrate his first birthday empty-handed. Walking around the market on Chang and Street, she didn't see anything good until she saw a Persian man with strange facial features selling a dazzling array of beads. She stopped. "Miss, take a look. These are definitely top-notch treasures." Luo Qingqian stood in front of the stall for a long time before she slowly picked up the transparent bead that was mixed among the colorful beads. Although she didn't have the ability to appraise treasures, this bead felt incomparably cool when it was placed on her palm. Against the light, there was a penetrating feeling. If she guessed correctly, it should be the night luminescent pearl. "I want this bead." Luo Qingqian gave a soft laugh, feeling very satisfied. For something like the night luminescent pearl, in this kind of world, it was something that could only be found by chance. She returned to the Eastern Palace. When she opened the back door, a familiar figure appeared in front of her. Chapter 2062. Foam. "Master, you scare me to death." Luo Qingqian bit her lips and said, "How did you come back so quickly? I wasn't here in the morning, and you slipped out of the Eastern Palace. How could I not worry?" His brows slightly knit, and he was a little angry. Now, although Dong Liang's matter had completely extinguished the Ninth Prince's arrogance, there were still remnants of his influence. Perhaps the people in the court and harem did not know her, but the people on the Ninth Prince's side were very clear about Luo Qingqian's position in his heart. Whenever he thought about how those cruel people could harm her, if she was not by his side, his heart would not be able to calm down. There were some things that he was not in a rush to have, but now he was eager to have them. "Don't blame me first." Luo Qingqian pursed her lips, and her eyes sparkled as she looked at him and said, "I'm going to buy you a gift." Hearing the word gift, Feng Qianxie's expression froze. He then raised his eyebrows and said, "It seems that the Eastern Palace's rules are not strict enough for the maidservants to speak without restraint." Luo Qingqian heard this and quickly walked forward to grab his arm. She said with a sweet smile, You don't know, but those maidservants are scared of you. They would kneel and beg for mercy at the slightest thing. Why don't you have any tender feelings for the fair sex? It's enough to have you." He narrowed his eyes, and his expression was still very serious. But when he looked at her, his tone could not help but be gentle. Feng Qianxie probably never thought that he would become like this. Because of a girl, his emotions would be affected like this. "All right," she accepted his words of love and said with a faint smile, "For the sake of the crown prince, Jiang." She took out a transparent bead from her sleeve and handed it to him. "How is it? It's pretty, right?" Feng Qianxie looked at the gift she gave him, and his heart was filled with joy. On the surface, he pretended to be cold because of her running out of the palace and said, "Do you believe that Linhua Hall can find 10 identical beads like this?" "You," Luo Qingqian angrily said in a fit of anger. "Then give it back to me. There's no reason to return what you've given away." Feng Qianxie saw that she was reaching out to take the bead and hurriedly used her height advantage to raise my arm that was holding the bead to a place where she couldn't reach. Luo Qingqian put her hands on her hips and looked at him angrily. "This is called a night pearl. It will shine at night. In the future, even if I'm not around and there's no one to light the lamp for you, it can still light up your Linhua Palace Hall." Before he finished speaking, he reached out with his right hand and pulled her into his embrace. He raised his eyebrows and said, "I won't allow you to say that. You won't be gone. You will always be by my side." He didn't know why, but when he heard these words, he always felt inexplicably uneasy. He didn't like to hear it. He didn't like to hear it at all. Luo Qingchun saw his nervous expression and the way he hugged her tightly. Suddenly, she felt that she had said something wrong. Perhaps, even though Feng Qianxie was a little cold and sometimes violent. But to him, she was his weakness, a weakness that no one could touch. "I was just saying," she whispered in his arms, "I was just talking about the use of the night luminescent pearl. I like it a lot." He gently rubbed her head and replied, "I will treat it like a treasure and keep it by my side because this is a gift from you. I will be like the night pearl. I will always be by your side." She slightly nodded, and her beautiful eyes curved like crescent moons. Okay. Chapter 2063. The next day, Luo Qingchun slept until noon before getting out of bed. It was probably because Feng Qianxie had given her a calming incense last night that she slept exceptionally well. She did not wake up until the next day. Hong prepared the clothes for her and opened the wooden window. A cool breeze blew and a few light pink flower petals fell into the room. The air was filled with the faint fragrance of peach blossoms. How can there be peach blossoms in this weather? Luo Qingchun's brows slightly knit and a faint trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. Logically speaking, in this kind of deep winter season, there should be winter sweet blossoms. "Miss, today is Master's birthday. He specially ordered people to go to the peach forest 10 li away and transplant several peach trees." Hong said with a soft smile, "This servant will help Miss get dressed, and we can head to the front hall." "All right." Luo Qingchun gently nodded, and her mind was filled with thoughts. Could it be that Feng Qianxie had specially transplanted the peach blossoms because of her story? No, that shouldn't be possible. After he finished listening to the story, he pretended to shake his head and sighed. A story is a story and has no relation to reality. Feng Qianxie should not know that this story was related to her. Peach blossoms, it should be a coincidence. Sitting in front of the bronze mirror, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were filled with hope, and she had a faint smile. The original owner was truly a beauty. With the hair of a young girl, she looked like a 16 or 17-year-old little girl. She did not look like a girl who had been married for 3 years. She also felt a bit of pity for her. After all, 3 years of her youth was given to a man who did not love her. Feng Qianxie's birthday banquet began at noon, and there was an endless stream of people entering the Eastern Palace. Feng Qianxie, who did not like crowds, seemed to have invited all the influential people in the court and inner court. This included the Minister of Revenue, Rong's son, and his son, Rong Muling. At the same time, in the Rong manor, Rong Muling had not slept all night, and with a hangover, he looked very weak. His father, Rong's son, also looked a bit old. It was probably because too many things had happened during this time. After the Luo family's daughter committed suicide by jumping into the lake, there was no trace of her. The decades of friendship between the two families had been severed. Coupled with the exposure of the assassination attempt on the crown prince, the forces supporting the ninth prince were weakened by more than half. Even if the ninth prince was lucky enough to get away from this matter, the Phoenix Emperor still issued a decree to put him under house arrest in the residence. The Rong family had suffered 2 storms in a row. In addition, they were not the crown prince's people, so they never thought that they would be invited to the crown prince's birthday. Therefore, Rong's son was overjoyed when he accepted the invitation. This might be the best opportunity for him to win over the crown prince. Moreover, the crown prince had specially sent out 2 invitations. One was signed by him, and the other was signed by his son, Rong Muling. In his eyes, it was clear that the crown prince was willing to let bygones be bygones and give them a chance. Now that the Rong family was at the heart of the struggle, they had to seize this opportunity. Today is the crown prince's birthday. Quickly tidy up and follow father into the Eastern Palace. Rong's son glanced at Rong Muling, his eyes filled with dissatisfaction. Crown prince. Rong Muling narrowed his eyes, and a trace of confusion flashed through his eyes. Our family has never had any contact with the crown prince. In the past, when he held banquets in the palace, he never invited us. Why would he invite us to the Eastern Palace this year? Because the Rong family supported the ninth prince, he was very confused about the Crown Prince's invitation. Chapter 2064. Perhaps the Crown Prince feels that our Rong family still has value. Rong's son looked at him and said, "Perhaps it's because he appreciates your talent. After all, he even wrote your name on the invitation this time. He has good eyes." Rong Mu Ling smiled, and a bit of pride flashed in his eyes as he said, "Allow me to wash up and accompany you into the Eastern Palace." Rong Mu Ling did not know much about His Highness the Crown Prince. He only knew that he was cold and proud and did things ruthlessly and decisively. For the assassination this time, everyone thought that he would at least act forgiving to deal with Dong Liang's matter, but they never thought that he would execute him on the spot that night. Everyone from the Dong family was chased out of Chong and not allowed to take a single step into the city. 5 years of relationship as master and servant. He did not forgive them at all. But for this, Rong Mu Ling actually admired Feng Qianche. There was no need to forgive people who betrayed him. He chose a long blue robe and entered the palace with his father Rong's senator to him. He could roughly guess why the Crown Prince had sent him an invitation. It was nothing more than his talent and ability. Although he was born into an official's family, he had once been the top scholar and added glory to the Rong family. Along the way, Rong's son did not forget to remind him that if His Highness the Crown Prince appreciated him, he should not be too proud. They no longer had the capital to squander. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. "Father, he wants to use me because of my talent and ability," Rong Mu Ling said with an indifferent expression, "and whether I'm willing to be used by him or not depends on whether he has the qualifications." From the day he was born, Rong Mu Ling felt that there was no one smarter and more outstanding than him in this world. He had spent too much time on a matter of love, but unfortunately, he had lost completely. The woman he had always loved yearned for the imperial palace. It must be because there was someone in the palace that she missed. As for who it was, in the imperial palace, there were 2 men with the most power. One was the Phoenix Emperor, and the other was the Crown Prince. He did not think that Lan Lingqian would fall in love with the Phoenix Emperor, so it could only be Feng Qianche. Entering the Eastern Palace this time, he held onto a sliver of hope. Perhaps only by going there would he be able to see Lan Lingqian's figure. He was not going to redeem her, but to bid her farewell. He had done what he should have done, what he shouldn't have done, what he could and couldn't do. Lan Lingqian did not love him. She did not love him at all. As long as Lan Lingqian loved him even a little, she would not use their unborn child to achieve her own goals. No, to her, it was not their unborn child at all. It was a tool to complete a mission. Perhaps at this time, his love for Lan Lingqian had already turned into bubbles after being hurt again and again. All that was left was hatred and unwillingness, and the person he felt most sorry for in his life was Luo Qingchen. If he could see her again in this life, the thing he wanted to do most was to apologize to her, then take back that resolute divorce letter. If he couldn't, he would devote his entire life's energy to fulfilling his ambition and remain single for the rest of his life. Don't think that way. Rong San saw his carefree look and hurriedly said, "His Highness the Crown Prince's temperament is completely different from Jiao Wangye's. He is definitely someone who cannot be offended." Chapter 2065. Because today was the Crown Prince's birthday banquet, the streets of Chang and city were especially crowded. After walking and stopping for a long time, they finally arrived at the Crown Prince's Eastern Palace. At this time, it was already evening. The setting sun shined brightly above the Eastern Palace. Looking from afar, it was especially beautiful. Today's banquet was especially grand. From noon onwards, there would be singing and dancing. Groups of distinguished guests arrived one after another, presented their generous gifts, sat down at the banquet, and chatted merrily. Of course, on this important day, even if there was no invitation, there was one person who would appear. That was Lan Lingqian. She began to dress up early in the morning, planning to enter the palace with the Empress. "Your Highness, do you think my dress is all right?" Lan Lingqian was clearly a bit nervous, and her eyes trembled slightly. She had been preparing for Feng Qianche's birthday since 3 months ago. 3 years ago, the graceful rainbow dress did not leave an impression in the eyes of the crown prince. This year, she must use all her strength to perform a dance on his birthday. It looks good. The empress nodded, and her eyes were amiable. She actually liked Lan Lingqian. In these 3 years, this girl went from a little girl who did not know anything to someone who could pick up a dagger and stab the heart of an enemy. It was all for Feng Qianxie. She wanted to stay by his side and become his crown princess. Therefore, she obeyed the empress's words. If this kind of girl stood by Feng Qianxie's side in the future, no matter what difficulties they encountered, she would definitely stand behind him and betray the world. This was the reason why she, as the empress, liked Lan Lingqian. Therefore, even if Feng Qianxie did not invite Lan Lingqian this time, she still used the name of a dance class to arrange for her to enter. I don't know if the crown prince will remember me this time. Lan Lingqian's face was a bit worried. She pursed her lips and said, "Recently, I heard some news from the Eastern Palace. When the crown prince returned from Snow Peak Mountain, he brought a girl with him." The empress heard this, and her brows slightly knit. She then nodded and said, "There is indeed such a thing, but I'm not too sure who it is. Perhaps it's a Taoist nun from Qingsan Temple. His Highness the Crown Prince never mentioned it to the public, so no one knows." Lan Lingqian heaved a sigh of relief after hearing the empress' words. This time, the Crown Prince was going to the Snow Peak Mountain to pay respects to his mother. It was impossible for him to go with a woman. Then, in such a desolate, snowy mountain, the woman who could be brought back was most likely a Taoist nun. Perhaps it was because Ninth Wangya's matter was not over yet, so Feng Qianxie brought the Taoist nun back. "I'm relieved to hear that." Lan Lingqian chuckled and asked, "Nyang, when are we leaving? I can't wait to perform." Today, she was going to take back the regret of not being able to enter her life that year. She believed that the dance she had prepared for so long would definitely amaze the audience. Today's spotlight was definitely hers. At the same time, in the Crown Prince's Eastern Palace, Luo Qingshun waited for several hours in Linhua Hall. The reason was because Feng Qianxie said that a set of clothes would be delivered in the evening. She had to wait in the hall and change before going to the banquet. Chapter 2066. When she saw the clothes, Luo Qingshun was actually a little surprised because they looked like banquet clothes. In other words, these were the clothes that the main character would wear at a grand banquet. Wow, so beautiful! When Honger held it in her hands, she couldn't help but exclaim, "This is the first time this servant has seen such clothes." "That's what you said when you saw me." Luo Qingshun rolled her eyes at her and said, "So in Hong Er's eyes, I'm no different from clothes. Miss, please spare me." "Hong, I didn't mean that." In the next second, the little girl immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times. Luo Qingshun hurriedly supported her and sighed. "The maidservants of the Eastern Palace can't joke at all. Miss, don't say any more." Luo Qingshun chuckled and said, "Help me change. This dress should be quite complicated to wear." After a quarter of an hour, Luo Qingshun put on this simple yet elegant dress. Why was it called simple and elegant? Because it was ivory white in color. Why was it elegant? Because the embroidery on it was a phoenix, and there were many luxurious accessories. After putting it on, Luo Qingshun looked at the bronze mirror. It had to be said that clothes made the person. Even she felt that her appearance had increased by a level. "Wow, it's really beautiful." Hong looked at Luo Qingshun in the bronze mirror and couldn't help but sigh again. Luo Qingshun chuckled and teased. "Last time, Hong, I used roughly the same words to praise a dress." See, Hong consciously sucked in a breath of cold air and was about to say the same words. Luo Qingshun quickly interrupted her and said, I'll spare you. The sun was setting in the west. At this moment, most of the guests invited to the Crown Prince's Eastern Palace had already arrived. Feng Qianxie sat on the high platform with a faint smile on his lips. This year's birthday was definitely going to be the most special birthday of his life, because he wanted to announce something at his birthday party, and he wanted to tell someone that the girl was his and that she had nothing to do with anyone else. He would fulfill all her wishes no matter what it was. Not only did he have to do it, he had to do it in front of everyone. He was wearing an ivory robe embroidered with elegant bamboo leaf patterns and snow-white dragons, which complemented the sheep-fat jade hairpin on his head. It was just that there was something that flashed in her eyes that people couldn't catch, but they wanted a peek. Unknowingly, people were already attracted to her. Congratulations to Your Highness the Crown Prince for a happy birthday. Everyone raised their cups to congratulate him. His deep eyes exuded a light that was different from normal people, and this gaze landed on no one else but Rong Mu-ling. This was the first time he had examined a man like this, looking at him with an air of superiority. Rong Mu-ling naturally received such a gaze and felt an indescribable pressure in his heart. He felt that Feng Qianshei's gaze wasn't one of admiration, but rather a provocation. A provocation that came from an enemy, and it was enough to completely suppress him with the aura of a king. Feng Qianshei picked up a cup of wine from the table and narrowed his eyes as he looked in Rong Mu-ling's direction. Then, he drank it all in one gulp. This kind of toast seemed to be a final salute to his opponent. Chapter 2067. At the same time, Rong Mu-ling also slowly picked up his wine cup and downed it in one gulp. He didn't know what he was doing, but he felt an inexplicable discomfort in his heart. Father, maybe Uncle Luo just didn't come. Rong Mu-ling slowly retracted his gaze and said, After all, Qingxin hasn't been found yet. No. Rong Sun shook his head with certainty and said, How could I not know what kind of person Luo Lin is? His daughter is important to him, but the Luo family is also important to him. If the crown prince invites him, he will definitely come. After all, the ninth prince's matter was more or less related to him. Now, he had such a perfect excuse to join the other side. Whether it was the Rong family or the Luo family, it was an extremely good opportunity. Perhaps. Rong Mu-ling faintly replied and didn't say anything else. In the next second, let us enjoy a beautiful dance performance. Butterfly Spirit Dance. The melodious guzheng slowly sounded, and Lan Lingqian was dressed in a blue dance dress as she walked up the stage with light steps. The few women standing beside her were all dancers who served as a foil for her. She was like a blue butterfly dancing gracefully. Every time she glanced back, every time she smiled, she was so charming and flirtatious. Her lips were covered with a white veil, and when the night wind blew, the veil slowly fell to the ground. At the same time, Luo Qingshan appeared at the banquet's entrance. When she saw this scene, she immediately recognized Lan Lingqian. Actually, she could only be considered the second person, because the first person to recognize Lan Lingqian was none other than Rong Mu-ling. Rong Mu-ling, who was sitting in the banquet seat, was stunned as he looked at the girl standing in the center of the stage in disbelief. Her movements were charming and enchanting as she looked at Feng Qianshei on stage with every frown and smile. As he watched, he laughed self-deprecatingly. Since he was young, he had known Lan Lingqian for so many years. He only knew that she could dance, but he didn't know that she could dance so well. It turned out that Lan Lingqian wasn't that cold, so she had never been warm to him. It was just that he wasn't the person she liked. And if she was the right person, she would do her best and do her best for him. For some reason, when Rong Mu-ling saw Lan Lingqian dance like this, after a self-deprecating smile, he felt relieved. From beginning to end, this was a dead end. Luo Qingshan loved him. He loved Lan Lingqian. And the person that Lan Lingqian loved was Crown Prince Feng Qianshei. In that case, the most pitiful one was Luo Qingshan. The Rong estate waited bitterly and foolishly waited for him for 3 years, only to receive his cruel divorce letter. Thinking of this, Rong Mu-ling's heart froze for a moment, and he felt a slight pain. As far as Lan Lingqian was concerned, she only had eyes for Feng Qianshei. From the beginning to the end, he was the only one. That year, if it wasn't for Feng Qianshei, she would have died a long time ago. The moment she met him, she completely gave her heart to him. She couldn't give it to anyone else. At this moment, Lan Lingqian felt like she was a blue butterfly, constantly dancing and displaying her beauty. All the men sitting on both sides of the banquet were intoxicated, almost dancing with her. It could be said that only Feng Qianche's expression didn't change from beginning to end. His eyes seemed to have already skipped her and fixed on the woman in ivory white clothes at the entrance of the banquet. She really was very beautiful. He wouldn't get tired of looking at her. Chapter 2068. At the end of the song, everyone's eyes fell on Lan Lingqian's body and the audience burst into thunderous applause. However, there were a few people below the stage who couldn't bear to see such a charming dance and began to whisper among themselves. Did you hear? This person is actually the Rong family's adopted daughter. Her thoughts are quite heavy. You should be a bit quieter. She is one of the Empress people. It's because she is one of the Empress people that no one can say anything. Otherwise, this kind of woman would have already been. The voices of the audience were a bit louder, and Lan Lingqian noticed it. She arrogantly glared at that person, and that person did not continue speaking. It really was a beautiful performance. Crown Prince, don't you think so? The Empress sat to the left and looked at Lan Lingqian with a smile. This one hasn't seen someone dance so well in a long time. It was as if I had seen a blue butterfly. It's good that the Empress likes it. Feng Qianche nodded. His eyes were cold, but there was a bit of respect. Seeing that Feng Qianche was not attracted by Lan Lingqian's dance, the Empress could not say anything else. She could only gently knit her brows and shake her head in Lan Lingqian's direction. This was her secret way of telling her not to say anything more. However, Lan Lingqian did not listen. She was clearly a bit anxious. After all, she had spent 3 months learning how to dance. If she was unable to enter Feng Qianche's eyes, then she might not have a chance. Does His Highness the Crown Prince like Lingqian's performance? Her voice was filled with resentment, making her seem especially delicate. Feng Qianche narrowed his eyes, and there was a deep light in his eyes. Yes. He slowly stood up and walked forward. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Could it be that the woman who deliberately stood out could really obtain the Crown Prince's favor? At this moment, even Lan Lingqian was stunned. She thought that the Crown Prince would only say something. She never thought that he would actually stand up and walk in her direction. At this moment, she felt as if her heart was about to jump out. So many years of hard work, so many years of patience, so many years of recklessness. It was all for this moment. The person he loved the most was slowly walking towards him. However, she guessed the beginning correctly, but not the end. Feng Qianche had indeed stood up and walked towards her, but he did not stop in front of her. Instead, he brushed past her and walked towards the banquet's main entrance. Everyone's gazes followed Feng Qianche's figure until they vaguely saw a devastatingly beautiful woman standing at the door. The woman was wearing an ivory white brocade embroidered with flowers. Her long black hair was combed into a tasseled bun, with a golden begonia hairpin inserted diagonally on the top of her head. On her feet, she wore a pair of soft-soled shoes made of satin peacock thread. She narrowed her eyes, and the remaining light of the setting sun shone on her snow-white face. She was so beautiful that it was suffocating. For Luo Qingchun, there was an inexplicable nervousness in her heart. Uneasiness and panic filled her heart. This feeling didn't come from her, but from the original owner. Because at this banquet, there was a man she loved the most, but also hated the most, Rong Muling. When she stood at the door, she did not see Lan Lingqian dancing in the center of the stage, but rather Rong Muling sitting to the left. He did not seem to have changed from her memories. He was still gentle, elegant, and elegant. Chapter 2069. She took a deep breath and did her best to suppress the pain from the previous owner. Actually, if it wasn't for this moment, she would never have known that the previous owner loved Rong Muling so much. This kind of love, there were not many people who could do it in this time. What are you looking at? Why are you so engrossed? Feng Qianche was already standing in front of her at this time. Seeing her dazed expression, his heart sank a bit. Actually, he knew why she was so dazed. Although he didn't want to admit it, he would never back down. The person he loved, he would disregard everything to announce her identity to the world. I'm looking at a certain person's dance. Luo Qingchun gathered her emotions and seriously looked at him as she softly said, I don't know if this prince thinks it's good. Her faint smile swept away the haze in his heart. To him, As long as he looked at her face, his heart would feel strangely at ease. I wasn't paying attention. Feng Qianxie lightly shook his head and said, I was looking at you and found that you were focused on looking. Luo Qingchun was stunned for a moment and felt strangely flustered. Little did she know that his lips would curl into a smile, and he would only say one word, me. As soon as his voice fell, he slowly held her hand and walked towards a high seat. Along the way, countless gazes fell on her. There was shock, doubt, envy, jealousy. The two most dazzling gazes came from Rong Mu Ling and Lan Lingqian. They were completely in disbelief. Ling isn't that Qing Shun? Rong Sen's mouth was wide open as his sparkling eyes stared at Luo Qingchun in her luxurious clothes. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. At this moment, Rong Mu Ling could feel his hands trembling uncontrollably. The sun was setting in the west, and the night wind blew. The courtyard was filled with peach blossoms, and the air was filled with the smell of peach blossoms. Was it her? Was it really her? But how was this possible? In just a few days, she had actually become someone by the crown prince's side. No, it couldn't be. There was something wrong with her gaze. Although her eyes were still as clear as water, when they swept across his face, they were as indifferent as dust, without any ripples of emotion. It was as if they had never known each other. Maybe it's just that they look alike. He could feel that when he said this, even his voice was unconsciously trembling. This was because he was increasingly inclined to believe that the woman in front of him was Luo Qingchun. Really too similar. Apart from her worshipful eyes that had turned cold, there was no difference between her and Luo Qingchun, who had stayed in the Rong Manor for 3 years. Compared to Rong Mu Ling, Lan Lingqian's reaction was much greater. At first, she could not completely see Luo Qingchun's appearance. She only knew that there was a woman dressed in pure white standing not too far away, and Feng Qianxie was walking towards her. But when she got closer and closer, she felt like her heart was about to jump out her chest. Luo. Before she could finish speaking, she immediately shook her head and said, No, absolutely impossible. Didn't Luo Qingchun commit suicide by jumping into the lake? How could she appear here? Why was the crown prince looking at her with such a gentle gaze, as if he was looking at a treasure in the world? She had never seen Feng Qianxie have this kind of gaze before. She did not believe it. She did not believe it. She did not believe it. She would rather die than believe it. But the things in this world did not exist just because she did not believe it. To Feng Qianxie, Luo Qingchun was his everything. Chapter 2070. From the banquet's entrance to the high seats, it was only a few short steps, but Luo Qingchun felt like it was as long as a century. Actually, she was panicking. At this banquet, there were too many people who had seen her before. Even if the original owner had joined the Rong Manor for 3 years and almost never left, as the daughter of a great scholar, her appearance would be remembered by many people. In this moment, she suddenly began to hate her identity. This kind of identity would not bring any benefits to Feng Qianxie and would instead make him look bad. After all, as long as one person recognized her, this banquet would become especially awkward. Luo Qingchun even wanted to pull back her left hand and calm down to think about the current situation. If it was for Feng Qianxie's good, before she had a new identity, it would be best if their actions were not too intimate. Otherwise, gossip would be fearful. Feng Qianxie, who was walking in front, seemed to feel that she wanted to pull back her hand. His brows slightly knit, and his right hand that had been tightly holding her left hand suddenly let go. Luo Qingchun was stunned for a moment before she gently pulled back her hand. Her heart was somewhat disappointed, but she felt that this was what she had to do in this situation. Feng Qianxie could understand her meaning. If he did not understand, he would not have let go of her hand. Little did she know that in the next second, he suddenly turned around and grabbed her arm with his left hand. He pulled her into his embrace and took the opportunity to grab her waist. His right hand held her face, and after looking at her for a second, he did not hesitate to kiss her. See, everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. This scene could really be described with the word shocking. The crown prince, who had always been cold and indifferent, had actually kissed a girl in front of hundreds of officials. This kind of action was simply unprecedented. At this moment, there was only one word that could describe Luo Qingshun, and that was stupefied. Her mind was completely blank, and her hands were so nervous that they kept breaking out in cold sweat. Her breathing became even more hurried. But this kind of hurried breathing allowed Feng Qianche to find an opening. His thin lips moved in for a deep kiss. You? Luo Qingshun wanted to say something, but was blocked by Feng Qianche's kiss. In just an instant, fine snow began to fall from the sky, accompanied by peach blossoms that filled the sky. It seemed so tranquil. Ding! Affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 100%. After an unknown period of time, he slowly released her. At this time, the surroundings were still silent, and no one dared to say a word. When he slowly let go of her, her eyes couldn't help but turn red. She didn't know if she was touched, aggrieved, or some other emotion. In short, mixed together, almost made her cry. How could Feng Qianche be so overbearing, kissing her in front of everyone? How could Feng Qianche be so good, not caring about his identity from beginning to end? She suddenly felt a little worried. If he knew that she had been married to someone else for 3 years, would he take back all the favorable impression points he had given her? After all, he was so proud. How could he allow his crown princess to marry someone else? Even if she knew that Rongmu Ling had never touched her before, others didn't know. How would they look at him? Paper could not wrap fire in the end. At this banquet, there were 2 people who were 100% sure of her identity. Chapter 2071. After Feng Qianche let go of her, he slightly leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Don't worry, leave it all to me." Actually, he had been a bit worried that he had been too impulsive and had made her unhappy. After all, she had said before that he shouldn't kiss her in front of so many people because she would feel embarrassed. But he had just kissed her in front of so many people, and there was even, she wondered if she would be angry. But in that moment, Feng Qianche felt that he could not control himself at all. The possessiveness and jealousy in his heart had already completely covered him. He wanted to announce to the world that she was his crown princess. From this moment onwards, there was no one in this world that could steal her away, unless he died. She heard Feng Qianche's voice that was as gentle as ink, and her eyes swept over Lan Lingxian, who was standing not far away. She saw that her face was incomparably pale, and her body could not stop trembling. Her eyes were wide open, and she kept shaking her head, muttering something that she could not hear clearly. But she could clearly feel that Lan Lingxian had suffered a large blow. In fact, she was about to go crazy. When she saw Feng Qianche kiss a girl so overbearingly, she could feel a strange pain in her heart. It was so painful that she could not breathe. She wanted to use excuses and reasons to convince herself not to be afraid and not to panic. She would definitely have a chance. The crown prince was not a normal person. He would become the heir in the future and would have a harem of 3,000 beauties. But that was not a normal crown prince. He was Feng Qianche. Over the years, there had not been a single girl by his side. Whether they were beautiful or ugly, he had never paid too much attention to anyone. It was as if he would not fall in love with anyone and was as cold as ice. But now, he was treating that girl so gently. That girl who could not even compare to a tenth of her. She was Luo Qingshun. There was no mistake. She was a dirty woman in her eyes. Lan Lingxian did not know how she came to Feng Qianche's side, but she was not worthy of wearing clothes that matched Feng Qianche. She was only an abandoned woman. In Lan Lingxian's eyes, Rongmu Ling could not touch Luo Qingshun for her for 3 years. Even when she returned to his side, he still accepted her and treated her very well. This was her charm. She had this charm that made Rongmu Ling be dead set on her, but Luo Qingshun did not. So, even if she died, she would not believe that His Highness the Crown Prince would like Luo Qingshun and not her. It was because she had worked so hard. From the first time she saw him, she had been working hard in his direction. Feng Qianche held her hand as they walked up step by step. When they looked down, Luo Qingshun looked into Lan Lingxian's eyes, which were filled with hatred. Actually, Today's banquet in the Eastern Palace is partly to celebrate my birthday, and partly to introduce my crown princess to everyone. Feng Qianxie faintly nodded. His words were dignified, and he exuded a lofty aspiration. He was like a heaven-shaking lion descending from the clouds, causing people to hold their breaths as they stared at him. Luo Qingshun was stunned, and her heart began to beat rapidly. After that, Feng Qianxie continued. Before that, have Mo who invite the great scholar to the banquet. In that instant, Luo Qingshun suddenly turned her head, and her panicked eyes met his deep eyes. What? The great scholar? Luo Lin? The original host's father. Chapter 2072. In the next second, before Luo Qingshun could react, Luo Lin had already walked over from not far away. He was wearing a neat official's robe, and there were faint tears in his eyes. This old official greets, Your Highness the Crown Prince. No need to be so courteous. Great scholar, please sit. Feng Qianxie's tone was no longer arrogant, and instead gave people a feeling of respect. Thank you, Your Highness. Luo Qingshun looked at Luo Lin, who had slightly raised his head, and her eyes turned red. Looking at his aged face and tired expression, she suddenly felt very uncomfortable. There was something she had neglected. When she returned to Chang'an, she did not immediately report to the original host's parents that she was safe. In truth, she had also thought about this matter, but her status was too awkward. She wanted to wait until she finished explaining this matter to Feng Qianxie before returning home to report. But too many things had happened in the past 2 days, and she did not have time to recover. Your Highness, this official finds this girl familiar. Could it be? In the seats, there was an enemy of Luo Lin who wanted to embarrass the Luo family with so many people present. But he did not know that Feng Qianxie did not wait for him to finish before cutting him off. He narrowed his eyes and cut off that person's words. A trace of killing intent flashed in his deep eyes as he said in the next second, I am called Luo Qingqing, the second daughter of the great scholar. In an instant, Luo Qingshun decisively cut off Feng Qianxie's following words with a trace of decisiveness in her clear eyes. At this moment, the crowd below burst into an uproar. The people who did not dare to speak saw Luo Qingshun speak and also joined in the discussion. How come I've never heard of the great scholar having a second daughter? I've also never heard of it. But how could you and I know about the great scholar's family matters? If I remember correctly, the great scholar's eldest daughter is called Luo Qingshun. It seems that she married the son of Minister of Revenue Rong's son, Rong Muling, 3 years ago. You didn't remember incorrectly. It is indeed like this. A few days ago, Rong Muling kept divorcing Luo Qingshun, and that girl seemed to have committed suicide by jumping into the lake. Luo Qingshun's interruption and the whispered discussion made Feng Qianxie unconsciously frown. What was this girl trying to do? Her palms were covered in cold sweat, but her gaze was calm and steady. But he knew that she was nervous. What was she afraid of? What did she have to be afraid of? So what if he said her name? In this world, as long as he, Feng Qianxie, liked someone, no one could stop him, not even the Phoenix Emperor. I know what you're thinking. Luo Qingshun's eyes trembled slightly, and her voice became cold and low. She took a deep breath and turned to look at him, saying softly, "But I don't want to." She didn't want him to be criticized by others. So here, in front of everyone, she didn't want to admit the identity of the original owner. It wasn't because she looked down on the original owner, but because she had someone she wanted to protect. Actually, my big sister Luo Qingshun and I are twins. When I was young, because my body wasn't good, I was sent to the Qingsan Temple in the Snow Peak Mountain to rest. Luo Qingshun's lips curled slightly, and she said with a calm face, "But I didn't know that I met the Crown Prince a few days ago." This sounded a bit hard to believe, but no one could find a way to expose her. Chapter 2073. Wow, what a romantic encounter. I also felt that the feeling she gave off was different from normal girls. So she's cultivating at Snow Peak Mountain. I heard that there are many capable people at Snow Peak Mountain. Some can even observe the stars at night and tell fortunes. Everyone spoke one after another, and seemed to believe Luo Qingxun's words. In the next second, Lan Lingqian could no longer control her emotions. She pointed at Luo Qingxun and said, "You're lying." The empress who was sitting on the high seat was stunned, and her entire face instantly turned white. She knew that Lan Lingqian liked Feng Qianxie and knew that she must be feeling terrible right now, but she never thought that she would be so bold as to refute her face to face. Audacious. Feng Qianxie narrowed her dangerous eyes, and her entire body emitted waves of cold air, causing people to shudder. "Master, don't be angry." Luo Qingxun's beautiful eyes flickered, and her lips curled into a smile. "I wonder what this young lady thinks?" In that instant, everyone's eyes fell on Lan Lingqian. This person is too arrogant. Isn't it just because she's the Empress maid? This is His Highness the Crown Prince's banquet. What does it have to do with her? You don't understand. This woman looks like she wants but can't get it. She's envious of His Highness' second daughter. I can't stand this kind of person's face. She has no status, and she wants to climb up the social ladder with His Highness the Crown Prince. In this world, the higher the status of a woman, the more they loved to gossip. Tonight, the people who came to the Eastern Palace for the banquet were all rich and noble. In their eyes, the one they looked down on the most was Lan Lingqian, who had no status and could only use foxy dances to confuse people. In the next second, Lan Lingqian knelt down with a dong and looked at Feng Qianxie. This servant just doesn't want His Highness the Crown Prince to be kept in the dark. What Luo Qingxun? This person is Luo Qingxun, the Luo Qingxun who married the son of the Minister of Revenue, Rongmu Ling, 3 years ago. Lan Lingqian's sonorous and forceful words were like boulders pounding on everyone's hearts. And the one who received the heaviest blow was naturally Rongmu Ling. In her eyes, he was just a chess piece that could help her complete her mission. "You said that person is my sister." Luo Qingxun looked indifferent. Her expression was still very calm, without any ripples. "You're lying. You're lying." Lan Lingqian yelled at the top of her lungs, using almost all of her strength. She felt that she had gone crazy, completely crazy. "Then, if I can prove that I'm not lying, how will you compensate me for the false accusation?" She paused for a moment, and her originally indifferent eyes flashed with a cold chill. Narrowing her eyes, she looked at her and said, "Your life?" Everyone looked at each other. They could all feel the aura of the so-called second daughter of the Grand Secretary standing on the high platform. It was exactly the same as His Highness the Crown Prince's aura, making everyone suck in a cold breath. "Prove it." Lan Lingqian bit her lips and looked at her. "I'm definitely not framing you. I vaguely heard my father say that my sister is good at everything, but she's not good at music." Luo Qingxun's cold eyes narrowed, and a faint light flashed in them as she looked at her. "But what I'm best at is music. Taking advantage of His Highness the Crown Prince's birthday today, I'll play a song." Chapter 2074. Feng Qianxie's eyes slightly trembled as the words "I'm not willing" echoed in his ears. Actually, he had enough power to protect her, and he didn't care about the gossip of others. Seeing that she cared more about him, he directly made up a lie that made his heart warm and move. Luo Qingxun calmly walked in front of the girl playing the guzheng. The girl respectfully bowed and gave her a seat. "System, help me with something." "Ding, 1,000 exchange points has been taken. You have received 1 help from the system." The further she went in the space-time world, the lower her need for exchange points became. After all, she, who had a blank memory, had become strong through countless trials and tribulations. The system seemed to have sensed what she wanted and directly opened its lion's mouth. However, she didn't care. She just gave a proud snort in her heart and said to the system, raising the price on the ground, taking advantage of people's difficulties. She took back all her emotions and slightly knit her brows. Her eyes were as calm as water. Snowflakes fell from the sky and mixed with the peach blossom petals. It was a beautiful scene. Once upon a time, the previous host who loved peach blossoms had even been cruelly thrown away by Rongmu Ling. But today, Feng Qianxie had given her the entire Eastern Palace's peach forest. She should apologize to the original owner, because when she saw Rong Mu Ling in the future, she felt a heavy feeling in her heart. She wanted to bid farewell to him completely. My big sister has always been a very gentle person. Luo Qingxuan raised her hands and softly plucked the strings twice, saying, "It's a pity that her life was bitter and she didn't meet the right person." She plucked the strings again, and it was like she was telling a story, allowing everyone present to immerse themselves in this atmosphere. This song is dedicated to the big sister who once risked her life to see. I hope that she can have someone to accompany her in her next life and have someone to protect her. That year, the streets were filled with spring, and the rain was like a dream on horseback. Hiding from the rain under the eaves, she looked into a pair of deep eyes, just like the gentle breeze of snow on Mount Hua. The drizzle was slightly cold, and the wind blew a faint fragrance. My heart throbbed, just like your gentle sword gracefully passing by. As she sang, a few butterflies suddenly landed on the strings of her zither. They danced gracefully in the snow and peach blossoms. It was a beautiful sight to behold. At this moment, everyone present was stunned. Could this be the so-called art of divination that cultivators knew? Luo Qingxuan was completely immersed in the atmosphere of this song. In her opinion, this song could completely tell the life of the original host, later, who reunited at the wedding banquet, the beauty by the side of the candlelight flickering red. The lamplight reflected a pair of picturesque faces, like a gentle old dream on a cardamom branch. He didn't know who the other party was. Suddenly, his thoughts surged. Your white clothes are the same as before, and your expression is somewhat cold. Who knows that my heart is filled with fear? Maybe I should pretend to be crazy while I'm drunk, and borrow your embrace to keep a touch of lipstick. Outside the mountain gate, the snow brushed against his white robes and melted at his fingertips. With a long sword on his back, he wondered where he should go in the vast Jianghu. In this life, he was mocking himself like a joke. It was just wishful thinking. If you were of the same mind from the beginning, why did you provoke me into giving you the wrong feelings? Could it be that you were moved when you saw me lose my soul? Fortunately, after years of drifting in the world of mortals, my heart was already riddled with holes. Why would I be afraid of you using your fickle feelings as a blade? Adding a crack wouldn't hurt. Why not bury the past in the wind? Use the long sword as a monument, and the frost and snow as a grave. In this life, if the fault lies in meeting someone, I ask for a good ending. Chapter 2075. As soon as her voice fell, the strings stopped. Luo Qingxuan was surrounded by colorful butterflies. They sometimes landed on the strings of the zither, and sometimes landed on her hair. Everyone was amazed. They had never seen such a scene in their lives. This is simply a fairyland. The second young miss of the Luo family is really too amazing. No wonder she became the beloved of the crown prince. They are a match made in heaven. I've seen the eldest young miss of the Luo family a few times. I heard that she doesn't know music. I'm afraid this is really her younger sister. What do you mean by I'm afraid? I guarantee with my head that this is definitely her younger sister. Rong Mu Ling, who was sitting in the middle of the seats, looked at the indifferent Luo Qingxuan in shock. Countless butterflies fluttered around her, and the fragrance of the flowers in the air became even stronger. She just sat there casually, receiving the gazes of countless people. That kind of radiance was boundless. In the past, he had never felt that she was so dazzling. But today, he felt that she was so dazzling that he couldn't bear to look away. At that time, he had always thought that the most special person in the world was Lan Lingxian. From the first day he met her, he felt that she was different from other girls. She had a little bit of strength. Compared to the usual gentle and weak girl, she had an extra touch of dominance. But now, when he saw Luo Qingxuan's actions, he suddenly realized that the aura she was emitting was probably something that Lan Lingxian could never compare to. Maybe it was the aura she was emitting, or maybe it was that man stood silently behind him from the beginning to the end. His gaze was filled with gentleness and love. Rong Mu Ling only felt his heart thumping. It kept sinking into an endless abyss. It was like the song she sang. It was like a dream. After waking up from the dream, he fell off a cliff, disappearing without a trace. He knew that this song was the last song she would sing to him. From then on, the world was wide. But in his heart, there was an indescribable feeling. He sighed softly and murmured, "So you play the zither so well." Is this Qing Shun? Rong's son heard his son's words and said in disbelief, "I don't think so. It's her." He took a deep breath and said with a self-deprecating smile, "Maybe she was hurt too badly, so she changed." She had become calm and indifferent. She had become radiant. She no longer loved him. At this moment, there was a trace of hope in his heart. If everything could be redone, if they could still talk face to face, perhaps he would tell her everything that was on his mind right now. However, he didn't know if he would have such a chance. You. Lan Lingqian's face grew paler and paler. Her widened eyes were filled with disbelief. She knew that Luo Qingshan didn't know how to play music. In the past, because she didn't know how to play music, she often watched her play people for Rong Yuling and could only stand awkwardly at the side. But now, such a song was played by her with her own hands. Then isn't your life in my hands? Luo Qingshan curled her lips into a smile. Her eyes were ice cold and even had a bit of killing intent in them. To her, the original owner's tragedy was mostly caused by Lan Lingqian. If she didn't frame her, even if she lived in the Rong manor alone, it would be fine. Chapter 2076. Just based on this, Lan Lingqian knew that at this moment, she was standing below the stage like a joke. Countless pairs of eyes stared at her, all with mocking smiles. But she could only bite the bullet and continue to defend herself, because she knew that she had no chance. If she didn't say anything, she really wouldn't have a chance. In the next second, Luo Qingshan's cold eyes narrowed, and her clear eyes contained a cold chill. Her right hand heavily plucked the strings of a zither, and she looked at her with a powerful gaze. "Why don't you turn into a butterfly for me to see?" In that instant, the surrounding butterflies seemed to feel her anger and scattered, flying in all directions. Lan Lingqian seemed to be frightened by her aura and staggered back. The words were at the tip of her tongue, but she couldn't say anything. "Someone come, capture this person who framed the crown prince consort, and lock her up in the Supreme Court." Feng Qianxie gave a cold snort and gently held her hand while looking coldly at Lan Lingqian. This woman, what right did she have to bully his crown prince consort? Actually, Feng Qianxie knew Luo Qingshan's identity when he first saw her. Although she was in a sorry state, he was very certain who she was. It wasn't because he knew her beforehand, and it wasn't because he had seen her before. It was because he had picked up her divorce letter. Or perhaps it couldn't be said to be her divorce letter, but someone else had given her a divorce letter. Every word on the divorce letter was quite ruthless. Some words, even if it was a woman he didn't love, he might not say it out loud. At that time, he felt that Rong Mu Ling was a man who was quite cruel to women. He secretly looked down on this kind of person. In his world, he wouldn't do anything because of benefits. He wouldn't marry someone he didn't love. No, it's not like that. Lan Lingqian knelt down with a dong sound, and tears fell down. Her pair of bright eyes stared at Feng Qianxie and said, "Your Highness Crown Prince, I have no complaints if you want to kill me, but this woman is Luo Qingshan." She cried as she screamed at the top of her lungs. "Do you still remember? You saved me once. When I was 10 years old, my family was attacked by our enemies. You saved me with your own hands." "I don't remember." Feng Qianxie's voice was very, very cold, without a trace of warmth as she interrupted her words. "From then on, I liked you." Lan Lingqian did not care about Feng Qianxie's indifference at all. She spoke the voice from the bottom of her heart in front of everyone. She had waited too many years to confess to him. In the past, it wasn't as if he hadn't had those women by his side, but his indifference always made her feel relieved. She kept telling herself that she still had a chance. She still had a chance. But today, when he kissed Luo Qingshan recklessly in front of everyone, she realized that the man who was as cold as ice could fall in love with someone else. It was just that he didn't see that person. However, she was unwilling to accept it. After so many years of waiting, she had sacrificed so much, even sacrificing an innocent child just to be able to walk to his side. Even if she wasn't his crown princess, it didn't matter. As long as she could stay by his side, she would be satisfied. But she knew that she didn't have a chance. That woman, that dirty woman, could actually become the person in his heart. That was a woman that Rong Mu Ling wouldn't even look at even if she dressed up every day. That was a woman that could be locked in the woodshed and divorced with a divorce letter. Chapter 2077. The surrounding air instantly quieted down, and the two guards who were about to drag Lan Lingxian away also stopped. Feng Qianche stood with his hands behind his back as he coldly looked at the girl in front of him. After a few seconds, he coldly snorted and said, "I, Feng Qianche, want to say something to everyone here today. The person I love, I will always love her deeply. If any of you want to hurt her, you'll have to kill me first." His voice was very cold, almost chilling to the bone, causing people to shudder. The Empress, sitting at the side, looked at Lan Lingxian with a face full of worry. She wanted to say something, but did not dare to open her mouth. She knew the Crown Prince's temper better than anyone else. If he wanted to do something, there was nothing he could not do. It was the same for the person he liked. Tonight's incident in the Eastern Palace made everyone know that the Crown Prince had already chosen his Crown Princess. That was the second daughter of the Grand Secretary, Luo Qingqing. Of course, there were still people who thought that Luo Qingshun was Luo Qingshun, but so what? If the Crown Prince was willing to marry her, no one in this world could stop him. After a sleepless night, she slept until the afternoon the next day before waking up. Hong informed her to go to the main hall. Feng Qianche had set up a banquet and invited Luo Lin and Madame Luo. She was dressed very casually, wearing a blue dress with a double butterfly cloud pattern. Her long black hair was combed into two ordinary buns. "Come here quickly." Feng Qianche looked at her and could not help but fall into a daze. The corner of his mouth raised into a faint smile. Madame Luo rushed forward and hugged her, saying, "My daughter, my daughter." At this moment, her eyes unconsciously turned red. The hearts of parents in this world were pitiful. The original owner was the daughter they had doted on since she was young. In the end, when she got married, she lived a life like hell. They all understood in their hearts, but the original owner did not say it. She was a good girl and would rather swallow all the pain than let her parents worry. So in the end, she took the divorce letter and chose to die. "Mother, it's fine." She took a deep breath and gently patted Madame Luo's back. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "I'm back. The child is back. Don't be like this." Lorraine frowned and said, "His Highness the Crown Prince is watching." For Lorraine, what she had experienced in the past few days was simply one climax after another. Not only was his daughter still alive, but she had also become the Crown Princess by accident. That Crown Prince was Feng Qianche. Feng Qianche, who never placed anyone in her eyes, was cold and aloof, and had never had a lover. "Sir Luo is fine." Feng Qianche gave a soft laugh. He looked at him with a look of respect, as he said, "The madam must be missing Qing Chun." When Luo Qingxun heard this, she supported Madame Luo and walked to the front of the dining table. At the same time, she did not forget to snort softly. "Feng Qianche, tell me, when did you find out about my identity?" Hiss clang. Lorraine and Madame Luo both gasped. Lorraine was so shocked that the chopsticks in her hand fell to the ground. His daughter. How? How could she speak to the Crown Prince like that? Not to mention his daughter. He had been an official in the palace for many years, but he had never seen anyone who dared to call the Crown Prince by his name. Just as he was about to reprimand his daughter, Feng Qianche spoke first. "Don't be angry." Feng Qianche patted her head with a pampering expression and said, "This matter is a long story. After we finish eating, I will definitely tell you the truth." "Are you certain?" Chapter 2078. Really? Luo Qingshun did not see her father and mother's stunned expressions. Instead, she looked up at Feng Qianche with a proud expression and said, "Our Luo family's rules are very strict. Father has been... This girl is spouting nonsense." Luo Lin very decisively cut her off. With a faint smile, she retorted in a serious manner, Our Luo family has never had any rules. Luo Qingshun was stunned for a moment and thought, how could her father expose her with such righteous words? It seems that Uncle Luo is right. Feng Qianshe pretended to be deep in thought before curling his lips into a smile. After all, if the Luo family's rules were strict, you wouldn't be like this. What about me? Luo Qingshun pursed her lips and said, Your Highness, are you envious that I have such a good father? She originally thought that it was to show off, but Feng Qianshe did not even think about it and directly replied, That's right. You. Luo Qingshun was stunned by his sudden words. She wanted to say something, but she bit her lips and could not say anything. Yes. He saw her cute appearance and said with a chuckle, But I won't be envious in the future, because Uncle Luo is also my father. Your Highness, this old official doesn't dare. Luo Lin felt her heart beating abnormally fast. She was filled with excitement and fear. Uncle, don't be so polite. I will definitely treat her well. Feng Qianshe seriously looked at Luo Lin and said, The things she was unable to obtain in the past, I will definitely give them all to her in the future. AI, Madame Luo heard this, and her eyes instantly turned red. She sighed and said, Qing'er has been our treasure since she was young, but, as her mother, I only like it when your highness becomes the emperor in the future. No matter how many beauties there are in the harem, I will still occasionally come to see her. This was probably a mother's last wish. After all, the emperor's family was quick to like and quick to forget. But Feng Qianshe was different. His right hand tightly held her hand as he looked at Madame Luo and said, There are many people in the world, but I only want Qingchen. It doesn't matter if I become an emperor in the future. Other than her, I won't marry anyone else. This was Feng Qianshe's promise, a promise he made in front of Luo Qingchen's parents. After dinner, they bid farewell to the Luo couple. Luo Qingchen took a bath and changed into a goose-yellow pleated moon dress. She stood by the window and looked at the beautiful scenery outside. A bright full moon hung in the sky, peach blossoms fluttered in the air, and light snowflakes fell one by one. She opened her hand slightly, wanting to receive the peach blossoms covered in snow, but Feng Qianshe, who had appeared behind her at some unknown time, tightly grasped her hand. It's cold, he said softly. This season isn't the season for peach blossoms, so the preparations were a bit rushed. He had already transplanted all the peach blossom trees 10 miles away from Chang'an. Although the scene was not big enough, it was more than enough compared to the Rong family's pear garden. It's already very shocking. Luo Qingshun took a deep breath and looked at him with a pair of clear eyes as she said, You really don't mind that I was once Rong Muling's wife? Perhaps I can't say I mind. I should say I envy you. Feng Qianshe gently pulled her hand and hugged her as he said, What I envy is not that you married him, but that you loved him. Feng Qianshe. Chapter 2079. Luo Qingshun looked at his focused eyes, and a faint mist appeared in her eyes as she said, If I said that person really wasn't me, would you believe me? For some things, she was her, and if she wasn't, she wasn't. She did not need to explain it to everyone, but she wanted to explain it to him. If you said it, then I'm willing to believe it. Feng Qianshe was stunned, and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. Although he did not completely understand what Luo Qingchen meant by this, he was willing to listen. He listened to her every word, every sentence. When I came to this world, it was when you saw me. Luo Qingchen took a deep breath and looked at him with an incomparably serious gaze. That Luo Qingchen that Rong Mu Ling divorced had already died before I appeared. She roughly told Feng Qianshe her identity from a spiritual point of view. His brows slightly knit together, but he seriously nodded as she explained. After speaking for a long time, she gently raised her right hand and tapped his head as she said, Do you understand? Feng Qianshe rubbed his forehead with a dazed expression and then said with a nod, Although it's a bit out of my understanding of this world, I can understand. My crown prince consort is only occupying Luo Qingchen's body. She is not herself. Right. Luo Qingchen nodded with a brilliant smile and said, As expected, smart people's ability to understand is especially strong. Then, when my crown prince consort met me, it was the first day she came to this world. Right. Luo Qingshan heard this and felt her heart become especially excited. She did not even think about it as she hugged Feng Qianshe beside her and rubbed against his clean clothes as she said, "Our family's crown prince is truly smart." Feng Qianshe held her waist with both hands and said with a smile that was hard to hide, "I don't know why, but after you said this to me, I feel especially happy in my heart." There was a feeling that the person he was tightly hugging belonged to him from beginning to end. She had never loved Rongmu Ling and had never become his wife. The heavens had their own plans for her to meet him on the first day she came to this world. Then, he fell in love with her without hesitation. Luo Qingshan's days in the Eastern Palace were very leisurely. Everyone no longer called her Miss, and followed Feng Qianshe's wishes to call her Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort. There were very few people coming and going in the Eastern Palace. Once, when she went to the courtyard, she saw a familiar figure. He was dressed in a navy blue robe and had his back to her. He was transplanting peach trees with several gardeners. Luo Qingshan looked at his back and frowned slightly. She couldn't recognize anyone's back. However, she could do it for Rongmu Ling. Perhaps it wasn't that she could, but that the host could. She slowly walked forward, her face calm and composed as she lightly mocked. "Young Master Rong, you actually have so much free time to come to the Eastern Palace to plant peach trees?" Luo Qingshan could clearly feel Rongmu Ling's back stiffen. After a few seconds, he slowly turned around. His face was the same as before, and his deep eyes were filled with endless emotions. He stared at her in a daze for a long time before saying, "Have you been well?" Even if he knew that his previous wife did not understand music, it was impossible for her to summon any butterflies. Chapter 2080. He knew why she said that she wasn't Luo Qingshan at the banquet. It should be for Feng Qianshe. If the high and mighty crown prince liked someone who had already been married and had been divorced, people would definitely talk behind their backs. This was perhaps the best way to protect Feng Qianshe. Suddenly, she felt an inexplicable sense of jealousy. Once upon a time, every time she focused, every time she looked at him, it was for no one else but him. Rongmu Ling, our Rongmu Ling, this is a love that is bleak to the bone. Did you do the right thing or the wrong thing? He kept asking questions in his heart as his brows furrowed even tighter. Do you care? Luo Qingshan shrugged and slightly nodded. Looking at the yard full of peach trees, her lips curled into a smile as she said, "In the past 3 years, she hasn't talked to you face to face like this." She? Rongmu Ling's brows slightly moved and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. She was definitely Luo Qingshan, but why did she use she and not I? It doesn't matter. Luo Qingshan shook her head and said with a faint smile, "Rongmu Ling, you will definitely regret it. You will definitely regret it. In the future, you must not think of me because you will never meet a second Luo Qingshan." As soon as her voice fell, she turned around without saying anything and saw Feng Qianshe standing in the snow not far away. He was holding a pure white coat in his hand, and there was a faint light in his deep eyes as he stared at her. Luo Qingshan looked at him and pursed her lips. With a smile that was like a spring breeze, she walked towards him step by step. In that instant, it was like she had made the most important choice in her life. She walked towards the right person without a care for anything else. The person behind her would be buried in her memories forever, never to be thought of again. Feng Qianshe watched her walk to his side, and his lips curled into a faint smile as he said, "We didn't remember to bring a coat when going out. It's so cold. What will you do if you get cold?" His voice was very gentle. While speaking, he did not forget to put on the coat for her. After putting it on, she didn't forget to jump up and down a few times. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him on the cheek. "Thank you, Your Highness. You should change the way you address me. Your Highness the Crown Prince Consort." He raised his right hand and tucked her messy hair behind her ear. Did that Miss Luo call him husband before? Ever since he found out that Miss Luo was actually not the same person as her, he had developed a heart similar to gossip. Occasionally, she would bring up old matters, wanting to hear some stories about the Luo family's young miss and Rong Mu Ling TSK Tisk. Luo Qingshun smiled faintly. She raised her eyes and said, "It turns out that our lord husband also likes to inquire about other people's affairs." His right hand gently wrapped around her waist as he smiled and said, "I just saw regret in Rong Mu Ling's eyes. Men would always understand men better than women." This morning, he found out that Rong Mu Ling's name was among the people responsible for planting the peach trees. He probably went to a place 20 miles away from Chang and to replant the peach trees, so he was responsible for transporting them to the East Palace. He did not stop him, but he could not help but want to take a look. If they met, what kind of scene would it be? Reality proved that his premonition was very accurate. They really did meet. He could see the reluctance and regret in Rong Mu Ling's eyes. He could also see the indifference and carefreeness in Luo Qingshun's eyes. Seeing this scene, his heart was strangely happy. Very happy, very happy. Chapter 2081. After that day's banquet, many other things had happened. Most of it had been told to her by Honger after inquiring from other places. Although it was not a big matter, she still felt a bit uneasy. It was probably because she had dreamed of a foggy scene these past few nights. It was pitch black all around, and although she could not see clearly, she could feel danger. The news that brought came from Lan Lingqian and Rong Mu Ling. In the end, the Empress still protected Lan Lingqian. Although she had spoken without thinking at Feng Qianshei's birthday banquet, it was not a big matter of murder or arson. For someone who had done so much for the Crown Prince's future in secret, it would be too cruel to kill her. After the Empress pleaded again and spoke of the things that Lan Lingqian had done in the past, Feng Qianshei finally relented. But he very clearly spoke to the Empress. Although his tone was cold, it was very respectful. "Today, I let Lan Lingqian go not because of what she had done before, but because you spoke to me. But from now on, this woman can never appear in Chang'an City. Otherwise, don't blame me for not showing mercy." Feng Qianshei believed that a woman could not cause any trouble. He had spoken to the Empress, but he still spared Lan Lingqian's life. But Lan Lingqian's obsession was even more terrifying than he had imagined. Even Luo Qingshun did not think that a person's obsession could be so deep and terrifying. 7 days after the birthday banquet, because Luo Qingshun was staying in the Eastern Palace, the steward specially recruited 4 servant girls and 2 nannies to be in charge of the Crown Prince Consort's food and clothing. The 4 servant girls had lively appearances and looked very kind. As for the 2 nannies, they seemed to be sisters who had luckily escaped from the fire. Their faces were completely ruined, and their voices were completely hoarse. In the steward's eyes, only this kind of person had no desires in the world and could do their best for the palace. But reality proved that his plan this time was completely wrong. In the inner hall, one of the old maids slowly walked in. Outside the door, there were 4 beautiful maidservants. She put the calming incense on the table and said in a hoarse voice, "His Highness the Crown Prince has seen that the Crown Prince Consort has not been sleeping well recently. So he had this servant light the calming incense for the Crown Prince Consort, so that the Crown Prince Consort can sleep peacefully." "In," she faintly replied. Her eyebrows slightly moved as she asked, "Is the Crown Prince not coming back tonight?" Replying to Your Highness, just now the housekeeper asked this servant to convey that the Crown Prince and the Phoenix Emperor are discussing the strategy of using troops to attack the barbarians at the border today. They should be returning after the morning court session tomorrow. The nanny replied carefully with a deathly expression. Hearing this, Luo Qingshun gently frowned and said, "You can leave first." "Yes, Your Highness." She felt an inexplicable sense of unease. Usually, Feng Qianshei would not come to the Eastern Palace every night. After all, without an opponent like the 9th Prince, his future position as the Emperor was already in the bag. The Phoenix Emperor was naturally clear in his heart. Adding in the fact that his body had not been in a good condition recently, he would come to find Feng Qianshei to discuss the war at the border. Actually, in the Phoenix Emperor's eyes, no matter how Feng Qianshei and the 9th Prince fought, the throne would belong to Feng Qianshei in the end. This was because the person he loved the most in this world was Ling Long loved the house and its crow. No one could surpass Feng Qianshe in his heart. Luo Qingshan laid on the bed with her brows tightly knitted the entire time. The feeling of panic in her heart became even stronger. No, this was definitely not just a feeling. Chapter 2082. She closed her eyes and kept thinking about the dreams she had in the past few days. Layers upon layers of images flashed through her mind. She was surrounded by smoke in the darkness, and a burning sensation came from her chest. She felt endless pain. The voices she had heard in the past few days sounded in her ears. Some were familiar, some were unfamiliar, some were lively, and some were old. But the voice that confused her the most was the hoarse and deliberately low voice. It was like layers of gongs and drums were beating on her heart. She seemed to have grasped a certain tone. When she wanted to explore it, a sinister face suddenly appeared in front of her. In that instant, she suddenly opened her eyes. Her surroundings were like a dream. Smoke lingered everywhere, and the air was filled with thick smoke. The entire room was filled with flames, and screams came from all around. She felt weak all over, and even breathing became difficult. She couldn't tell if this was a dream or reality. Beads of sweat fell from her forehead. Just as she was about to use teleportation, a sinister face suddenly appeared in front of her. She smiled and said, "Although it was very difficult, I still managed to wait for an opportunity." The voice of the person in front of her was still hoarse and low. But compared to the respectful appearance from before, there was a trace of insidiousness. "Actually, even if I didn't get an opportunity today, as long as I was in the Easter Palace, I would definitely get an opportunity." She laughed as she spoke. She poured a bucket of oil on herself from head to toe and poured the rest on Luo Qingshan. Luo Qingshan, who was lying on the bed, shook her head. Her eyes narrowed and trembled as she said, "Lan Lingxian." Actually, there was doubt in her voice. How could this be? How could that white-haired, wrinkled nanny be Lan Lingxian? It had only been a few days. What did she do to her? You must be very curious, right? Why did I become like this? Ha ha. She laughed and said, "Because I can only get close to you after becoming like this." She thought that she must be the most cruel person to herself in the world. That was because she had taken a knife and slashed it across her face. Then, she used a brand that was used in prison to fiercely burn her face. In order to make it more realistic, her neck and hands were all burned. She had burned herself. Interesting. You've turned yourself into something neither human nor ghost. How interesting. Luo Qingshan took a deep breath and found that her voice had begun to become hoarse due to inhaling too much smoke. However, there wasn't the slightest trace of fear on her face. Instead, she was calm and composed. "You're not allowed to look at me like that," she roared. "I hate your eyes the most." Shouldn't she be terrified? Shouldn't she be afraid? Shouldn't she be panicking and screaming for help? Why? Why didn't she do that? Instead, she looked at her with a mocking gaze. Seeing her cold snort and not saying anything else, Lan Lingxian slowly took out flame tongue from her sleeve. She looked at her and said, "He is sacred and inviolable. A dirty person like you doesn't have the qualifications to become his crown princess." "Shouldn't the dirty person be you?" Luo Qingshan sneered and replied, "Didn't you and Rong Mu Ling already?" Chapter 2083. At this moment, the entire Linhua Palace Hall was engulfed in a sea of fire, not to mention Luo Qingshan's sleeping quarters. She was very clear in her heart that even if Feng Qianshe was in the Eastern Palace, he would not be able to cross the sea of fire and enter. Although she had already completed the mission, she was still unwilling to die like this. She couldn't even blame herself for being too careless, because even if Lan Lingxian didn't succeed this time, she would eventually succeed. Ha 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 ha. Luo Qingshan, you can fool everyone, but you can't fool me. Lan Lingxian laughed almost crazily. She looked at her and said word by word, "What twin sister? You're lying to a ghost." The scorching flames continued to burn in their direction. In the next second, Lan Lingxian did not hesitate to blow on the flames. In an instant, her entire body was engulfed in raging flames. She gritted her teeth and pounced on the bed where Luo Qingshun was lying. She really wanted to lie on this bed. It seemed that Feng Qianshei's scent still lingered on it. "I'm going to perish together with you." This was the last sentence that echoed in Luo Qingshun's ears. At this moment, she seemed so powerless. She finally understood what it meant to be the underdog's counterattack. If someone in this world wanted you dead, even if you escaped once, twice, thrice, or even 4 times, you would still be dead. As long as she wasn't careful, she would succeed, because she did not care about her own life and was not afraid of death. In her eyes, your death is her only purpose in life. If she and Lan Lingxian were to fight face to face, Lan Lingxian would have no chance of winning. However, she had used another terrifying method to torture herself to the point where she was completely bruised. Then, she had come to her side. The pain in her body had already exceeded what her body could bear. She only felt her mind go blank, and her body was as light as snow. A familiar feeling instantly came over her. Just a second ago, she was still thinking about what if she was lucky enough to survive. But now, she had become an ugly woman covered in scars. What should she do? But in the next second, she was very clear that she might not be lucky enough to survive. Once a person could not feel pain, there was only one outcome for them: death. At this moment, her originally blank mind began to recall the story of everyone's joys and sorrows. Actually, if she stood in Lan Lingxian's perspective, she might be the most pitiful person, because the person she thought of from beginning to end had never even looked at her. This feeling couldn't help but remind her of the original owner. She was just another original owner, except she didn't have the kindness of the original owner. Most of the time, she used the means of harming others to achieve her own goals. But in the end, she didn't get anything. Luo's Luo Li's Inz's Bizes by her, Inz's hers is by her in, by her of her. Even though the fire had already burned into her bones, she fought until the last second to prevent herself from fainting, because she knew that if she fainted, she would definitely die. But she had to make sure that Luo Qingshun died before her. That way, she wouldn't waste all the effort and sacrifices she had made in her life. As for Luo Qingshun, she only felt that her mind was becoming clearer, her body was becoming lighter, and her thoughts were becoming clearer. In the next second, she suddenly opened her eyes. She was surrounded by a familiar scene. Chapter 2084. She froze for a moment, and her eyes were filled with fear. Looking at this place that she used to feel incomparably safe and familiar, she felt panic in this moment. Does the host want to see the scene after your death? Yes/no. The system seemed to be smart enough to avoid the scene before her death. It knew that its host did not want to think about it. Wait a minute. She took a deep breath, and her eyes trembled. Her clear eyes flickered with a faint mist. She bit her lips and said, "I can't go back. The host is already dead." According to the laws of the chaotic space, since the host is the host's space-time client, it is impossible for the host to return to the original plane. She felt a buzzing sound in her head, and her mind went blank. From the first mission to today, she had experienced satisfaction and regret, but it was far from what she was feeling right now. Yes, she was not willing. Even if Lan Lingxian had used a method of mutual destruction to luckily kill her, even if Lan Lingxian did not exist in that world, her heart was still not willing. Is there really no other way? Her eyes were slightly red, and when she said this to the system, her voice was a bit choked up. She had never felt so helpless before. It made her feel all the things she had experienced in the past hundreds and thousands of years and all the abilities she had. In the face of life and death, everything became insignificant. The host can finish looking at the scene and then decide whether or not to go back. Perhaps there is no need to go back, because if you really want to go back, the things you have to sacrifice will be greater than the cost of reversing time. Luo Qingshun took a deep breath and did her best to control her emotions. She slightly raised her eyebrows and said, "Let's see." The bronze mirror was surrounded by a faint blue light, and the originally blurry scene gradually became clear. Looking down, the entire Eastern Palace was in chaos. The Linhua Hall was filled with black smoke, and the fire was growing bigger and bigger. The The sound of a horse's hooves came from the south street. Before the horse stopped, Feng Qianxie had already jumped off the horse like a madman and rushed towards the Linhua Hall. The fact that she was able to see this scene proved that she had died in the Linhua Hall. Standing in front of the bronze mirror, she could feel her heart pounding intensely again and again. The entire primal chaos space seemed to be filled with a burnt aura, filling all of her nerves. Feng Qianxie kept running and running. Everyone who tried to stop him was knocked to the ground. He recklessly rushed towards the inner hall of the Linhua Palace. Huge flames burned on his moon-white robes, but he didn't seem to care at all. The Linhua Palace Hall was shrouded in smoke and flames. Just as he was about to rush in, the entire Linhua Palace collapsed with a bang. At this moment, Luo Qingqian's tightened heart gently fell to the ground. If Feng Qianxie walked in, the possibility of her coming out was very small. But when she saw the despair in his eyes, her fingertips began to tremble uncontrollably. Thud! He kneeled on the ground and screamed hoarsely. The surrounding housekeepers and guards all knelt on the ground, and the Eastern Palace fell into a terrifying silence. A few seconds later, Phoenix Qianxie stood up and rushed into the ruins. She began to dig up the collapsed debris with her bare hands. They were all a mixture of wood, iron tiles, glass, and so on. Blood dyed his hands red, dyed his white robes red, and even dyed his heart red. After a long time, he seemed to have dug something out. His expression froze for a moment before he slowly pulled it out. Chapter 2085. When we met at the beginning of the year, our joyous union was crisp. When we parted, our joyous union was shattered. At this moment, the joyous union bell in his hand had already been shattered. The entire bell was pitch black, and there were faint traces of blood on it. He carefully stroked the bell in his hand, and his slender fingers could not stop trembling. He opened his mouth to say something, but he could only let out a painful groan and could not say anything. That was the person he loved the most in his life. He deeply remembered the words she had written on the Kongming lantern. You will never meet a second Luo Qingqian in your life. Please treat her well. He wanted to use all his strength to treat her well and only treat her well in this life. But why was the heavens so cruel? She had not truly become his crown princess, and he had not given her all the gentleness he had in his life. But she had left him in such a hurry and did not leave anything behind. Enough. Luo Qingqian had already completely collapsed after seeing this scene. What kind of tragic scene was this? She came to that world and reversed the fate of the original host, making Feng Qianxie fall in love with her without any hesitation. But now, she had not even given him any warmth and had left like this. How cruel was this? In the next scene, the system seemed to be very reluctant. When it said these words, its voice was no longer as mechanical. The scene in the bronze mirror instantly changed. White silk hung high, and the entire Eastern Palace fell into a deathly silence. Her body was placed in the ice-blue coffin, and the peach blossoms had almost completely covered her, leaving only a pair of tightly closed eyes. Feng Qianxie slowly walked into the ice coffin, and his right hand gently covered her eyes as his body trembled. The surrounding people all knelt down with a dong sound and heavily kowtowed to the ice coffin. Your Highness, it's time. The housekeeper bowed with tears flowing down his face and respectfully said, Let the crown princess rest in peace. Feng Qianxie heard this, and his hands tightly gripped the ice coffin until his knuckles turned white and made a creaking sound. Even at this final moment, he was not willing to let go. He still remembered that he had finally dug out her corpse a few days ago. It was pitch black, and the white bones were clearly visible in several places. However, she was able to recognize her at a glance amidst the corpses. Even though she was completely unrecognizable, he still rushed towards her without any hesitation. Perhaps no one in this world could understand Feng Qianxie's feelings. It was a kind of despair that had fallen to the bottom of the valley. It was as if he was in a pitch-black darkness. He wanted to find a path to light, but he found that no matter where he went, it was a dead end. There was no way out. A loud roar resounded in the air. His vision turned black, and he lost all consciousness in front of her ice coffin. The scene in the bronze mirror gradually blurred, and the scene was getting farther and farther away. Luo Qingchun, who was standing in front of the mirror, was gradually unable to see clearly. It wasn't until it was completely extinguished that she came back to her senses. The scene had ended. Host, you can sort out your emotions before entering the next plane. Although the system knew that this was very cruel, as a space-time traveler, it had to bear the consequences. Not every plane could be accompanied for a long time, and it was even more impossible for every plane to end without a cause. The memories they had of each other were the most precious treasures. Chapter 2086. The chaos space fell into a deathly silence, as the system seemed to be thinking. After a long while, its mechanical voice slowly sounded. It isn't impossible to return to the world. The host must meet the following conditions and pay the price. She gave a slight nod, already having an answer in her heart. Host, please look at the bronze mirror. In an instant, all the basic values that came from her appeared on the bronze mirror. Permanent experience ability, space and time, freeze level 4 permanent ability, teleport level 2 exchange points, 9,000. If the host wants to return to the previous world, the first condition is you must have more than half of your total experience points. The host only has 2 chances to return to the previous world. The first time deducts 50% of your experience points, and the second time deducts 100% of your experience points. My current experience points are 6,000. It's already over half of my total experience points. Luo Qingchun's eyes had a faint sparkle as she said, in other words, I can go back. This is the first condition. The system feels that the host needs to know the price. Could it be that half of my total experience points isn't considered the price? Luo Qingchun slightly knit her brows. After all, 50% was 3,000 exchange points. How many missions would she need to complete to get 3,000 exchange points? To her, this was already a very large price. This is only the condition. What is the price? The host's next main mission will be very difficult, and the plot will completely collapse. Main mission. Luo Qingchun's eyes trembled, understanding what the system meant. If her guesses weren't wrong, every 10 worlds was the main mission. She would lose all her powers and meet Du Jiushang. Each world is the host's main mission. The system was very clear this time, telling her all the benefits and letting her make her own choice. After 3 seconds, she closed her eyes before suddenly opening them. I want to go back. She would bear everything by herself. No matter what the future would be, no matter what kind of thrilling experience she would have to go through, it would be her life. Ding! 50% of the host's total experience points has been deducted. You will return to the Deep Palace Wine-Drunk Peach Blossom World. Return time, 7 years later. 7 years. Luo Qingchun stared blankly for a moment. She frowned slightly and pursed her lips. What is my identity this time? If her identity was not bad, she should be able to return to Feng Qianche's side very quickly. However, if one's status wasn't too good, there would be many difficulties. Host, you don't have an identity. Your body and appearance are based on your current appearance. She suddenly understood why the system had to repeatedly confirm whether she was going back or not. It was because the price she had to pay was too high. Got it. She nodded lightly and said, send me back. This time, when she went from the primal chaos space to the plane space, she did not receive any memories, and her mind was clear. The host will be sent to a random location. I wish the host good luck. When he opened his eyes again, he was in a foggy place. He could hear the sounds of men and women laughing and chatting. The next second, there was a feeling of suffocation. She suddenly opened her eyes and floated up from the water. Screams rang out around her. In an instant, Luo Qingchun's face turned red. This was a huge bathtub, and the men and women were all naked. Chapter 2087. She was wearing a snow-white robe, and her feet were bare as she fled to the streets of Chong and city. The university was filled with snow, and the ground was covered in snow, causing her to shiver from the cold. She turned her eyes slightly and looked at the 3 large words on the signboard. Dark Fragrance House. Logically speaking, If the system said that this scene was not intentional, she would not believe it even if she died. 7 years was just a matter of a few minutes to her. But in this world, 7 years had already passed. The snowy Chong and city had not changed at all, but it was a bit more lonely. She wondered who the current ruler was. Was it Feng Qianche? It should be him. After all, in the eyes of the Phoenix Emperor, he was the only one qualified to become the emperor. Luo Qingshan thought of this and slightly lowered her head. Looking at her snow-white robe, her eyes could not help turning red. Actually, she did not look at her appearance in the chaotic space. Suddenly appearing in this world, she felt like an alien had entered the city. First, she had to find a place to change her clothes. Chong in City's splendid house. She had bought clothes here before. She asked for some silver from the system, and after buying her clothes, she found an inn to stay in. Luo Qingshan felt that it was very strange. Whether it was when she was standing in the middle of Chong in City's main street in her snow-white robe, or when she went to a splendid house to pick out her clothes, or when she was standing in the main hall of the inn. Wherever she appeared, everyone's eyes fell on her, without exception. Miss, what kind of room do you want to stay in? The shopkeeper looked at her for a long time before stammering out a sentence. His face was red and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Something a little higher quality. Luo Qingshan looked up and saw the other party's incomparably sluggish expression. She said with a faint smile, "If there isn't one, any room is fine." In the next second, blood flowed out of the shopkeeper's nose and he fell to the ground. The waiter quickly walked over and respectfully said, "I will arrange a room for Miss." "All right." Luo Qingshan gently nodded and her eyes fell on the waiter's chest. Although she looked like a tomboy and was dressed in men's clothes, one could tell that she was a woman just by looking at her chest. The waiter chose a superior room for her. When he left, he scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "Miss is really too beautiful. Even a woman like me can't help but take a few more glances at you. Those men naturally can't take it. Our shopkeeper is naturally more lecherous. He can't stand it after looking at you for too long. Is it beautiful?" Luo Qingshan's clear eyes trembled slightly, and a trace of doubt flashed through her eyes. Logically speaking, she had not seriously observed her appearance in the primal chaos space for so long. Actually, that should be her true appearance, beautiful. Xiaoyu has never seen such a beautiful and fairy-like woman. The little girl smiled excitedly and said, "I always feel that talking to a lady is an especially extravagant thing." Although Luo Qingshan felt that Xiaoya's words were too much, she still smiled and said, "Thank you. Then I won't disturb Miss Rest." Xiaoya blinked her eyes and carefully closed the door. Luo Qingshan thought for a bit and then slowly stood up and walked in front of the bronze mirror. At this moment, she knew why those people were so surprised when they saw her. Because she really was very, very beautiful. Compared to any supporting female lead, cannon fodder, or even the original owner, she was more beautiful. Chapter 2088. Luo Qingshan looked up and carefully looked at her face. She was wearing an Alizur Moon, white, magnolia blue embroidered satin robe. Her waist was lightly held up by a light blue soft muslin from the Jitsue mountain. She had put on a little makeup, and her jet black hair flowed down to her slender waist. A purple crystal magnolia hairpin was inserted into her hair, and an exquisite string of pearls hung around her neck, making her look even more beautiful. If she was like an immortal with a beauty that could cause the downfall of a country, now she was like a fairy that had accidentally fallen into the mortal world and was tainted by the mortal world, causing men to suddenly lose their souls. No wonder there were so many people looking at her. Looking at this pair of bright, starry eyes, Luo Qingshan could not help but feel a bit of doubt. What kind of story did she experience that caused this girl, called Luo Qingshan, to fall into 100 reincarnations? She suddenly wanted to know what kind of person she was in the past. Was she as proud as her, or was she a girl that was as warm as the wind? Knock, knock, knock. A series of knocks sounded and Luo Qingshan looked at the wooden door and said in a soft voice, "Come in." "Mississippi." Xiaoyu came in with a few pastries and a pot of tea. "Just now, our shopkeeper felt very embarrassed and specially had me bring you some food and tea." Our shopkeeper has never been willing to give away the best Biluakun and osmanthus cakes. Thank your shopkeeper for me. Luo Qingshun poured a pot of tea for herself, and the fragrance of the tea was very refreshing. She took a sip and said, "This is indeed the best Biluakun." Xiaoyu scratched her head and said with a smile, "I rarely see the shopkeeper be so willing, but he has a question he wants to ask Miss." "Please ask. Although it's hard to say, but does Miss have a marriage partner or someone you like?" The shopkeeper has a son who is the top scholar of the court, and his eyes are higher than the sky. He is still unmarried. Top scholar? Luo Qingxin's brows slightly moved as she said, "It seems like the shopkeeper is very lucky." Actually, what he was thinking at this moment was that since he was the top scholar, he would have a chance to see Feng Qianxie. Wait a minute. That would only happen if the emperor was Feng Qianxie. That's right. I wonder if Miss... I'm not married. You can tell me the truth. Luo Qingxun put the osmanthus cake into her mouth and took a bite. Actually, I'm not a local. I'm new here and would like to ask Miss Xiaoyu a few questions. I'm just a waiter. Miss, you don't have to be so formal. Just call me Little You. Yes, Little You. Luo Qingxun also felt that the girl's name was a bit awkward. Sometimes, names gave people a feeling of closeness. How many years has it been since His Majesty succeeded the throne? Luo Qingxun didn't dare to call her by her name. After all, she didn't have any status right now and didn't have any qualifications to call out the 3 words Phoenix Qianxie. Actually, she was a little worried. If she went through so much trouble to come back here and he wasn't here anymore, wouldn't that mean Xiaoyu probably didn't expect her to ask such a strange question? After all, most people wouldn't ask about the D family right away. But she still told the truth. The new Emperor Feng has succeeded the throne for 7 years. Was it the previous crown prince? Luo Qingxun turned her eyes, and a faint light flickered between her clear eyes. Yes. Xiaoyu's head turned as if she thought of something. She quickly said to her, "If Miss came to Chang and because of the Emperor Feng, then I'm afraid you've come for nothing." Chapter 2089. Because the Phoenix Emperor, Xiaoyu said in a low voice, does not approach women. Luo Qingxun was stunned for a moment. Her starry eyes flashed with endless complex emotions that were hard to describe. In the next 2 hours, she asked Xiaoyu many questions in a roundabout way. After piecing everything together, she had a rough idea of what had happened in the 7 years that had been blank. 7 years ago, the crown princess lost her life in the Eastern Palace. The crown prince, Feng Qianxie, wanted to die several times but was saved. After the Phoenix Emperor and the Empress discussed it, they decided to abdicate and pass the throne to Feng Qianxie. It was not for anything else but to give him a reason to live. Then the Phoenix Emperor and the Empress went into seclusion in the mountains, leaving the world in Feng Qianxie's hands. But for the Feng Qianxie at that time, death was his only obsession. He drank peach blossom wine every day and every night in the palace. Sometimes, when he drank too much, he would talk to himself. It was like he was talking to himself, but it was also like he was talking to someone he loved. During that period of time, everyone in the rear court was in a state of panic. Naturally, rumors and slanders spread among the people. It was said that Feng Qianxie planted 10 li of peach trees in the palace and personally brewed the wine, naming it drunk peach blossom. As long as he drank this wine, it gave him a slight sense of security. In the next half a year, the barbarians invaded the Feng dynasty's borders. Because Feng Qianxie did not care about court affairs, the Feng army was forced to retreat. Until one day, the barbarian general arrogantly said to all the soldiers of the Feng kingdom, "When I take Chang, and the first thing I will do is pry open the coffin of the empress and see the so-called #1 beauty of the Feng dynasty." Ha ha ha. It was probably because of these words that that person's head and body were separated 3 days later. Feng Qianxie personally led a large number of troops to slaughter the barbarians. In a month, there were countless large and small battles. But the army led by Feng Qianxie did not lose a single time. In every battle, he killed until his eyes turned red. It was as if he only felt safe when blood flowed out of his eyes. A month later, the barbarians were killed back to their home. They personally delivered 2 cities and several hundred cows and sheep before the battle was settled. There were rumors among the people that if the barbarians could make peace, the new Phoenix Emperor would not leave a single one of them alive. Because in this world, no one could mention his wife's name. No one was worthy. Moreover, those who insulted her had to die. From then on, the new emperor, who had been unable to recover from the setback, took over the court once again. In 3 days, he had replaced all the people in the previous court, and those who remained were all useful talents. Everyone knew that the new emperor was cold and cruel. After officially taking over the government, no foreign enemies dared to invade. Every time there was a rumor that the Phoenix Emperor was drunk, there would be enemies trying to invade. But every time, the army led by Feng Qianxie would completely annihilate them. Over time, the reputation of the newly crowned Feng Emperor spread far and wide. She did not know why, but just hearing a small matter about Feng Qianxie from the mouths of others made her heart throb uncontrollably. To her, it was just a matter of the snap of a finger, but Feng Qianxie stayed in this plane alone for an entire year. He still kept his promise and emptied the entire harem for her. Even though it was rumored that he didn't get close to women and kept men as his companions, he didn't care at all. Feng Qianxie was such a proud person, but she actually did not care at all. Chapter 2090. Why are you like this? Woo 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 woo. Right when Luo Qingshun was about to lie down and take an afternoon nap to recuperate, the clamorous noise at the entrance of the inn drew her attention. Little Yu's voice. She muttered in a low voice, and then she put on a coat and walked towards the door. The winter was piercingly cold, and snow fluttered about. Such weather couldn't help but cause one to feel indescribably desolate. Little Yu stood at the entrance with a pot of cactus in her hand, and her eyes were completely red. Standing in front of her was a well-dressed man. His face was as clear as jade, and he had an elegant demeanor. Numerous onlookers had gathered in the surroundings, and all of them were drawn over by Little Yu's cries. Luo Qingshun's gaze descended onto the wintersweet in the young man's hand. Wintersweet was really a proud and aloof flower, and it could bloom so brilliantly even in such a cold winter. Besides Little Yu and the young man, there was an old man that carried a carrying pole to buy flowers and plants. Because of the cold weather, besides wintersweet, he only sold camellia and cactus. The old man was a merchant, and for the sake of making a living in this cold winter weather, he naturally praised his flowers. This was what Luo Qingshun heard from the onlookers next door. So long as it's my Uncle Liang's flowers, then not only can they bloom beautifully in the snow, they can even attract butterflies to stop. Little Yu pointed at the cactus and said, "It can attract butterflies as well." Of course, cactus are the best flowers and plants. At this moment, Yin, who just happened to return to the inn, couldn't help but stop moving, and she picked up a pot of wintersweet and said proudly, "Even if butterflies can be attracted in such weather, it's absolutely not that cactus in your hand. The probability of it being wintersweet is much higher." Little Yu cried when she heard this. The onlookers by her side told her that Little Yu and Yi Yin were childhood sweethearts. Little Yu's parents had passed away when she was young, and the owner of the display case saw her begging pitifully on the streets, so he gave her a place to stay. Since they were young, Yi Yin played with Little Yu like she was Little Yu. Yi Yin was smart, and she understood everything with just a hint. Little Yu had studied something for a long time, so Yi Yin could give her the answer in a few minutes. As time passed, Little Yu started to hate people like Yi Yin. No matter what he did, he was always number one. He was always high and mighty. Even if it was the imperial examination, he would still be able to become the top scholar. The most important thing was that this top scholar liked to sing a different tune from her since they were young. If she said one, he would say two. Even if it was an unsolvable right or wrong, Yi Yin could still make it sound absolutely correct. Little Yu had been in a bad mood recently, so the manager had always asked her to observe the women that came and went, and if there were any good ones, she would introduce them to Yi Yin. Suddenly, Xiaoya had a very strange feeling in her heart. It was as if there was a big stone in her chest that made her unhappy. Yet it just so happened that Yi Yin had come to offend her at this moment. He clearly knew that her favorite flower in this lifetime was cactus, but he insisted on singing a different tune. Why did she like Cactus? It was probably because Cactus looked like her. She wasn't that good looking, but she was always so strong. Xiaoyu, don't cry. You should read more books. Have you ever seen a cactus attract butterflies? Ian shrugged and chuckled lightly. Otherwise, you'll become a joke to others. When he heard Ian's arrogant tone, why did he feel so displeased? Chapter 2091. Everyone's gazes descended onto her at the same time, and a wave of sighs resounded in the surroundings. A few robust men were even unable to control their emotions and directly fainted. Ian sized her up from top to bottom, and a wisp of a bright glow of admiration flashed in her deep eyes. Although she didn't know who she was indeed a devastatingly beautiful woman. This young lady is... Ian raised her brows with deep meaning and curled her lips into a smile. Xiaoyu hurriedly wiped away her tears as she hurriedly pulled on her sleeve and said, "Young lady, don't misunderstand. He's actually quite good. A matchmaker a second ago, but she was bullied to the point of crying in the next second. No matter who it was, their impression of Yi Yin would become bad. Even though he bullied her, she still didn't want others to have a bad impression of him. I really can't see what's good about him." Luo Qingshun narrowed her eyes and took the cactus from Xiaoyu's hand. This young master said that cactus can't attract butterflies. I don't agree with this view. Such a simple and easy-to-see logic. Could it be that you have a better opinion? You're right. Luo Qingshun lightly waved the cactus in her hand and said to Yin, "I heard that you're the new top scorer. Then why don't we have a competition? System, the ability to summon butterflies shouldn't have been cleared yet, right?" After all, she had spent an entire 1,000 exchange points, and it was too much of a loss to use it just once. Moreover, the matter at hand was urgent, and it wasn't time to abuse it. No, the host can use it repeatedly in this world. But what? The host used an ability to win against others. That's unfair. Shut up. Has the system never heard of this? With an ability, one could do as one pleased. Luo Qingshun was already very displeased that half of her experience points had been deducted, but the system just had to take advantage of this situation to speak up. Then wouldn't it serve it right? The host is so fierce. Sob, sob, sob. Sob my ass. Logically speaking, when the mechanical voice turned into a sobbing monster, it was simply more terrifying than the scene of a car accident. "Young lady, what do you want to compete in?" Yian's gaze carried a probing expression. Could it be that you want to compete in attracting butterflies? After all, she was the top scorer in the new subject. Her guess was very accurate. In fact, Luo Qingshun sometimes liked to communicate with such people. After all, she didn't need to waste too much time talking to them. It was just a simple sentence, but everyone understood what he meant. Why not? Luo Qingshun nodded slightly, her starry eyes carrying an imposing manner that ordinary people didn't have. Yi Yin was stunned, and then her expression suddenly became slightly solemn. A few seconds later, he shook his head and chuckled. "I'm not an arrogant person. In such cold weather, I really can't attract butterflies. I was just telling Xiaoyu that if it's in the middle of spring, wintersweet is more likely to attract butterflies than cacti. That's exactly what I want to refute." Luo Qingshun put the cactus on the ground and narrowed her eyes. "I don't think the winter-sweet cactus is more attractive to butterflies. If you don't believe me, I can show you." Hiss! The crowd sucked in a breath of cold air upon hearing this. This new top scorer, called Yi Yin, was arrogant and unruly, and she was deeply loved by the current emperor. Now, a little girl had suddenly appeared to provoke her, and everyone was very surprised. Chapter 2092. Large snowflakes fell from the sky. In such cold weather, not to mention butterflies, even a mouse probably couldn't be seen. But that woman, who was wearing a snow-white robe and had a face that could cause the downfall of a country, said so calmly that she could use a cactus to attract butterflies. That's not possible. How could there be butterflies in such cold weather? Yeah, even if it's spring, this cactus doesn't have any fragrance. So how could it attract butterflies? But I don't think this young lady is just saying. Moreover, something like this can be verified in an instant, so there's no need for her to lie. Stop discussing. You'll know if you continue watching. The scene of millions of butterflies appearing in the same place seems to have happened before, but I forgot who told me about it. Luo Qingshun didn't have the time to listen to the gossips of the crowd. Instead, she raised her right hand and lightly shook the exquisite ring on the cactus. Yi Yin carefully sized up her actions, and there was actually confusion in her eyes. At the next second, a light blue butterfly flew over from afar. It lightly flapped the snowflakes on its wings, and they landed on the cactus. In just an instant, everyone had the same shocked expression. Even Yi Yin, who'd always been conceited, had opened her eyes wide as she gazed at the light blue butterfly. Before they could completely recover from their shock, a second butterfly flew over from nearby, and then a third, a fourth, a fifth. Not long after, countless butterflies swarmed over and formed a circle around the cactus, encircling it layer by layer. These butterflies were different from ordinary butterflies. Their bodies were practically transparent, and only their wings were suffused with a gorgeous light. They didn't seem to be afraid of the cold at all, and instead liked the feeling of snowflakes landing on them. Occasionally, they would lightly flap their wings, and the scene was too beautiful to be imagined. Wow! Wave after wave of exclamations of surprise rose and fell. Everyone was amazed by this inconceivable scene. Xiaoyu, who stood by her side, was completely stunned. Luo Qingshun pushed her a few times before she came back to her senses. She was so excited that she couldn't speak, and even her lips were trembling. This was the first time she'd won against Yi Yin to a certain extent, and it was the first time since she was young. Even if he wanted to use the power of his mouth to turn white into black, it would be impossible. After all, there were so many pairs of eyes watching. "Miss, you are truly a deity." Yi Yin raised her hand slightly. Her gaze first looked at little Yu before it descended onto Luo Qingshun, and then she curled her lips and smiled. I once heard a supreme figure mention that he'd seen such a beautiful scene, yet I wasn't able to fully believe it. Now, it's truly broadened my horizons. Luo Qingshun could sense that Yi Yin was slightly excited when she spoke these words. Therefore, nothing is absolute in this world. Since he is the top scholar, he shouldn't bully his childhood sweetheart, Xiaoyu. Luo Qingshun waved her right hand, and the butterflies slowly dispersed. Her eyes were still as calm as water. He didn't have any emotional fluctuations because of what had just happened. "Miss, little Yu." Yi Yin interrupted Xiaoyu, and her tone carried a wisp of a helpless tone. "I still lost to you in the end. Yi Yin, I still remember when we were 10 years old. Both of us were unconvinced of each other, and you said something before the master, and it caused everyone in the school to roar with laughter." Chapter 2093. It was a day when flowers bloomed, birds chirped, and the fragrance of flowers filled the air. The entire private school was filled with the aura of youth. Xiaoyu and Yi Yin were arguing incessantly because of a single question, and neither of them gave in to the other. In the end, Yi Yin won against Xiaoyu with her glib tongue. At that time, Xiaoyu was extremely angry and said, "Yi Yin, if you have the ability, then win against me for the rest of your life. Don't lose even once. I'll make you laugh to death if you lose even once. You'll marry me if I don't lose even once? You, look at how red your face is. I was just mentioning it casually. Why are you being so serious?" "Who's being serious?" "We'll talk about it if you don't lose even once." Most people had probably forgotten what they said when they were young, but Yi Yin had always remembered it very clearly. Actually, Xiaoyu remembered it as well. However, in her world, she felt that there was a huge gap between her and Yi Yin. She wasn't worthy of him. If she was half as smart as Yi Yin, then perhaps she would be even more confident in pursuing her dreams. Unfortunately, she wasn't. If she was smart enough, then she wouldn't have been unable to defeat him even once after so many years. But if she won this time, then didn't it mean that she'd lost the opportunity to stand by his side? Luo Qingshun seemed to have discerned some different emotions from their gazes. In the next second, she smiled lightly and said, "I seem to have made a mistake." It was probably because her smile was too charming. It was like a celestial maiden that was cold, like an icy mountain had suddenly descended into the mortal world, and it was so beautiful that it was breathtaking. Luo Qingshun couldn't be bothered to pay attention to those gazes. She just glanced sideways at Xiao Yu and said softly by Xiao Yu's ear, "Nothing is impossible in this world." Perhaps you think that this new top scholar got married because his standards were too high, but he actually already has someone in his heart. Perhaps, to him, she had always been an impossible person. Xiao Yu lowered her head and actually couldn't help but cry again. She didn't know what she was thinking, and she only knew that everything seemed to have come to an end. All her stubbornness had vanished at this moment, and only an empty heart and an indescribable feeling remained. It was already dusk when Yi Yin returned to the palace, and he was actually late for the game of chess with the Phoenix Emperor. After coming out of the inn, he didn't go anywhere else, but his feet were floating. It was clearly not a long journey, but he walked for a full 6 hours. "You're not in the right mood today." Sitting high above, Feng Qianxie was dressed in a golden robe, and his face was as cold as ice. Even though they were good friends, there was not the slightest bit of emotion in his words. "Your Majesty, I'm late." Yi Yin bit her lips and said, "Do you still have wine? Are you afraid that I don't have wine?" Feng Qianxie's cold eyes narrowed as the corners of his mouth curled into an icy smile. "There's plenty of wine. Let's see if my beloved subject's story is moving enough." Feng Qianxie seemed to have already jumped out of the fickleness of human nature. He was like an aloof and cold god, using an indifferent attitude to watch everything that happened in the world. Whether it was beautiful or miserable, he didn't care. No matter how tragic or heart-wrenching the story was, he would forget it after a while, and he would never be moved in the slightest. "The story is very long." Yi Yin slowly sat down and said with a self-deprecating smile, "Before I tell the story, I have a strange scene to share with your Majesty." "What scene?" "So it's true that a person can attract several thousand butterflies." Chapter 2094. Yi Yin was stunned. She looked at Feng Qianxie's face and couldn't help but feel a little terrified. Recently, he had entered the palace for a long time to drink and play chess with the current emperor. His temperament was indifferent to the bone, and his mood was unpredictable. His deep eyes seemed to see through everything, making it difficult for people to understand him. But his eyes just now had revealed a little bit of human nature. "Your story must be pleasant to hear. If it's not pleasant to hear, our wine will become a sin." Feng Qianxie narrowed his eyes and picked up the second goblet. He drank the drunk peach blossom wine in one gulp. Actually, his heart had suddenly been touched. The rings of his memories seemed to be pulled very far away, but also very close. He still remembered that year in the Eastern Palace. She sat in front of an ancient zither in a plain white brocade robe. She gently plucked the zither strings, and a beautiful zither sound rang out. Thousands of butterflies fluttered around her. That scene was too beautiful to be imagined, and she was so radiant. But in this lifetime, if he wanted to see her again, he could only dream. During these 7 years, others felt that he was high above and had endless power and glory. But in reality, as long as he knew it, his life was worse than a normal person. Countless nights, he could only rely on alcohol to numb himself. But this peach blossom wine was something that made him yearn for her. Drinking too much made him miss her even more. During this period of time, he realized that his memory had become especially strange. The more recent things were, the less clear they were, but the more distant things were, the deeper they were. "This is the story between me and Xiao Yu what?" His chaotic thoughts were pulled back by Yi Yan's last sentence. He frowned slightly, and a faint dark light flashed through his eyes. "His Majesty, could it be that you're not listening?" Yi Yan smiled awkwardly. She felt that she had been brewing for a long time and told a moving story, but the other party was not in the mood to listen. "Yes, I'm not listening." Feng Qianxie drank a mouthful of wine and answered truthfully. Sometimes, an overly honest answer would make people especially angry. But no matter how angry he was in his heart, he could not show it. After all, the person in front of him was none other than the high and mighty ruler of a country. Then does His Majesty want to hear it again? Yi Yin smiled bitterly, but her tone was still very respectful. Speak. Feng Qianche's words were concise. Yin could be considered to be one of the few people that he admired or could get along well with throughout these years. After all, smart people could always save a lot of trouble. Yin cleared his throat and recounted the story between him and Xiaoyu. Moreover, the fate between the two of them could be said to have taken a turn for the better. Coupled with the fact that Yin carried a great deal of personal emotions, it could be considered to be a moving story. Why was it called moving? It was because the eunuch who was originally standing beside Feng Qianche was quietly wiping away his tears. But Feng Qianche's expression did not change from beginning to end. After Yin finished speaking, he finally spoke slowly. Who's that person you said is capable of drawing butterflies over? Actually, Feng Qianche listened to it again just to hear this part of the story. Unexpectedly, Yin didn't mention it at all. Oh, so your majesty wants to hear about her? The corners of Yian's brows twitched slightly, and she thought for a moment before she said, that woman was really beautiful. She didn't seem like a local, and she wore snow-white clothes like a celestial maiden that descended from the heavens.